Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. There she comes.
Good afternoon.
Gina was running. There you go, back with coffee. Welcome to budget session 2 out of 3 if we count the capital improvement projects. And Todd, do you have anything to say, or is this Janet's show?
This is Janet's show. She's spent quite a bit of time just reformatting things, trying to make it a little more efficient and easy to understand, and I'm here to support her. So.
Well, thanks, Todd. Right now, I'm going to attempt to go to a screen share. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask for your assistance if I can. If you see people maybe that have their raised hand function up, or if you see someone that may have a question, if you can see the participants, to give me a shout out and let me know, because I can only see a few. So I request that.
I will keep track of that.
Thank you. What I wanted to share with you first is that you may have received the book in your offices here, or possibly the email version, and that's kind of the old way of the way we've always done it, I'll say, to give you some more detail. But today we're going to keep a high level informational program for you today. The one thing I will say is that I'm going to give a shout out to Todd, because he gave us the space to present things in a new way. So you'll see some of the old and some of the new, but we're hoping that it makes it a little bit easier to understand and gives you a little bit more insight into what our departments and City Hall is doing. So with that, I'm going to kick this off. Let's see. Share with you kind of just our objectives and some other key budget dates today. I know you got the packet, so I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm going to just point out we'll first be talking about our follow-ups. Then we'll be followed by the summary of all funds, and then move into the general fund. Lastly, unless we run out of time, I'll push this a little ahead of one of the things that we'll be talking about. But otherwise, Derek from Desert Willow will be presenting the operations budget overview for Desert Willow. Again, like I said, if we kind of get to where we're in a time crunch, we may push events to the next session and have Derek go ahead, since he can't join us for the next meeting. You do have some upcoming key dates over there. May 26th is our final session that will be talking about public safety primarily, and anything that we need to follow up from today's session. Okay, these might look a little familiar. I kind of truncated them and only took items 1 and 2. We put this in this order. The one thing I can tell you is possibly if you had the presentation that I sent out last night, I did make a little bit of a change there. The second one down on item list number 1, council chambers, it is now listed at 1.5 million, and that is reduced from 2.2. If there are changes from the presentation that you received last night, I will just try to remember to make a note of those. I'm also going to try to verbalize where I'm looking on my screen, since I know you can't see my mouse, even though I think you can. So if you don't know where I'm pointing, please let me know.
We might be able to see our mouse. Put it up there again. Yeah, we actually can see your mouse.
Okay, well,
so it's a helpful pointer.
There you go. And Mr. Luis is actually helping me as well. Mr. Espinosa, he is helping me by annotating in some cases where he's pointing something out. So with that, I'm going to show you this summary slide. Let's see, thank you. Again, the item that was changed is the second one down, went from 2.2 to 1.5. These are the follow-ups for the tier 1 and the tier 2 supplemental items. They are all funded. They identify the funding source here on this slide. The last item on the slide, undergrounding plan, it's italicized because that was not in tier 1 and tier 2, but we did want to bring to your attention that there is $750,000 in our restricted capital project fund and our capital improvement fund. And we're going to have a workshop with the City Council in July to go through that a little bit more in detail. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy to kind of go through these to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Janet. And actually, I think Janet did an exemplary job going through the tier 1, tier 2 projects already. So what I can do for council is go into any depth that you would like on any of these projects. I know there were some questions about the council chambers remodel and what was ADA, what was required, and say what may have been discretionary. I can provide that detail here this afternoon if you would like. And similarly, if there are other questions on any of these projects, I'd be more than willing to go into depth on those. Janet and Luis are also available to discuss just how we have funded those, but they principally have taken the charge from the last discussion with council where you really defined the what. This was a priority for council. They've determined the how council can achieve these projects.
Andy, excuse me, Councilmember Jonathan has his hand up.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Very quick question on the council chambers. Andy, does that include any IT modifications? And if not, were they completed previously? Or are any further IT enhancements needed for the council chamber?
Excellent question, Councilmember Jonathan. So there were IT augmentations and modifications made prior to the pandemic. I think it was anticipated that the council chambers remodel would have followed that project closely, but this project, the remodel, was put on hold early on in the pandemic. So a lot of that IT work has already been done. What is remaining are ADA work for ramps and stairs, restrooms, some of the doorways and aisles, seating. A lot of that is ADA. There were also some security and I'll say just general enhancements. It was anticipated that there would be some glass panels installed between the foyer where you enter the chambers and the chambers itself to deaden some of the sound that happens when people are entering in the council room. So those are the costs that are part of this project. The say discretionary costs, some of the seating is discretionary and some of the carpet replacement is discretionary. That constitutes about 20% of the cost. The other 80%, it's either ADA or safety and security and is strongly recommended. But to be very clear, the IT work has largely been done.
Thank you very much.
And let me follow up. By the way, I encourage all staff to be careful because if you call one question excellent, you'll have to call all the questions excellent. So let's just stipulate that all our questions are excellent. This one maybe not so much. But could you say a bit more about the council chamber modifications that are encompassed on this line item and whether any of them are geared to assure health and safety if heaven forbid there is more of this pandemic to deal with?
Thank you. So the project was envisioned prior to the pandemic and the scope of the project has not changed. Now, there may still be some opportunities for us to look at enhancements. If we can go back to the IT side of this, there may be some room for us to look at how we can incorporate virtual participation while we are having in-person meetings, really trying to maximize the opportunities for that. So that could be an additional IT modification that's relatively small in scope that we could incorporate into this project. But the project that you have here is the project as it was envisioned before the pandemic. And this is a modernization of the council chambers and a modernization that would address the ADA issues we have with accessibility getting into the council chambers itself. The ramps and the seating are not ADA accessible. There's other ADA issues within the chambers too.
This obviously is not a decision-making session, but we might want to put a post-it I've had issues since some of our sister cities are having hybrid meetings, and there is pending state legislation which would require cities to enable virtual appearance by members of the public, even if all council members and staff elect to be present in person. So let's just post it there.
Certainly, and we have some ideas on that and believe that as we're talking about our agenda workflow management solution, that we can integrate that project with the council chambers remodel and incorporate that very thing.
And Councilmember Jonathan?
Thank you. Is it okay if we ask questions about the other line items?
Sure.
I see people nodding their head. Andy, can you refresh my memory about Discover Palm Desert? What is the proposed spending on and what is the timing?
Okay, so for Discover Palm Desert, I might lean on Todd or Martine or any dialogue that they may have had. I have not been as close to Discover Palm Desert in the last few weeks.
And that money is, I'll tell you where the money comes from. That is restricted capital project fund, and that money has been set aside specifically that could be used for that. But that's 1.2. We'd have to talk to Martine about what that could or wouldn't cover.
Yeah, and specifically, I'm wondering if it's for the contemplated facility on San Pablo Phase 2.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. I caught a majority of that question as I was being elevated, but I believe the answer is we've got some work to do to finalize a scope. We had presented a pretty aggressive Discover Center at the Civic Center, right to the south of the skate park. And as we were doing some preliminary budgets, we ran into, of course, some funding challenges. And so with this 1.2 million, I'm not saying we're going to use all of it, but we do need to go back and revise the scope, work with the City Council so that we get a better estimate of how we can right size that facility.
So Martine, that was the question. This is for the proposed facility or the contemplated facility on San Pablo?
Yes. And
what's the timing? If I mean, is this construction costs that we are thinking of spending in the next fiscal year? What specifically is that for, and what's the timing on it?
That should be what our budget is for construction. But like I mentioned, we're going to have to go back and really try to marry the scope to it. So we're trying to get this designed this next half by the end of the calendar year, and in hopes to be in construction by the end of fiscal year 2022.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions on this page full of information?
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Councilmember Quintanilla.
My question is in regards to the broadband, since that was something that we universally agreed. I was wondering exactly if we can maybe have a little bit more clarity on where that 75,000 is getting us and what the projected needs are.
We're anticipating that this would be initially a study to provide opportunities to council. We've been meeting. I've had staff meeting with an expert in this field right now to try to understand, the various scopes of a broadband project. We're also looking at external funding, but there's no question once we decide to move forward, you're going to need to put together a formal feasibility analysis and budget construction. So that's basically what that's going to get you, is that first step on how to make a plan actionable.
Mayor Pro Tem Hornick.
Thank you. I want to emphasize, please, that as we go forward with that broadband, please keep in mind that there is a tremendous effort being put forth by CVAG with the county doing the same. So let's make sure that we integrate those efforts and don't do the same work over.
Yeah, once we decide to move forward with the study in which direction we're going to go, we're basically going to be presenting you with a menu of options that we could, and directions we could head. We are also going to be meeting with CVAG as well. In fact, I think we have a meeting with them next week on their phase 2 of their project to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts.
Okay, and I may have said CVAG when I just said that because it is critical to meet with CVAG, but also CVEP is working with the county. So
and we've already had conversations with them as well, and are trying to make sure that they're aware of what we're trying to do and vice versa. Good. So it's been very productive so far.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
And I will point out my typo on this slide that I can't stop staring at. It's not $1 million in median landscape rehabilitation. It's 100,000 coming from the general fund. So don't anybody panic. I think I fixed it 5 different times, but I guess I didn't. Anyway, if no other questions, I'm going to move on.
Yes, the comma's in the right place, so we got it.
That's something, right? All right. So now what we're going to do is move into all fund summaries. This is just kind of a very, very high level snapshot of all of our different types of funds, general fund probably being the most important to this presentation today. But this does give you an information on all the revenues that are coming in this year, transfers into these funds, transfers out, and also the expenditures planned for these funds. This does include capital improvement projects. They are shown in various locations throughout this page as far as all funds, and it'll show also almost $26 million in continuing appropriations, which are projects that were contemplated in previous years, including the immediate year we're in or a prior year, and are still going on or are still planned. I believe Mayor Pro Tem Harnick has her hand up. Do you have a question?
I do, thank you. I'm wondering, is there some corresponding from the slides you're showing and to the tabs in my notebook? Because I do have quite a lot, or I shouldn't say quite a lot, but I have a few highlights of, so I'd like to ask a few questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, I will share with you that the funds that are included in these various categories are under your tab 7 that just show the descriptions. If you're looking for a specific fund and what what is included, whether it's a special revenue or a capital project. But if you have a specific question, why don't you ask it? And I know Luis is standing by at the ready to help us with specific questions on specific things.
Okay, so then if I go to tab 7, I have a question. When we go to Fund 214, which is the housing mitigation fee.
Yes.
And it says funds are used strictly for projects and programs, then goes on. So I always thought it was, housing and does this mean when it says programs, if we had a child care center as we do at Desert Rose, would that, is that something that we're talking about? Is this?
Fund 214 housing mitigation is actually, let's see, I'm just making sure you mentioned childcare also, so it kind of threw me for a second. Right. However, housing mitigation is specifically for housing of low and moderate income families. We use that to offset things with respect to programs. It's collected from developers, and it's for programs or projects that the city's working on that can dedicate all of those units to people in specific categories.
Okay, can you give me an example of a program? So
housing mitigation can actually be used on many things, the same as our housing fund. So if you were to construct new housing that would be restricted to families with restricted incomes, or if you were to subsidize, one of the things that we use it right now for is we'll be using it for the self-help program. We'll also be using it oftentimes we use it if someone falls into the right category for employee housing. It's generally restricted to employees that work in the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Palm Desert. So self-help is working with us to ensure that that is the case on the ones they are assisting with, but also for any programs such as someone rebuying a home in Falcon Crest or Desert Rose, we can use this for down payment assistance, items like that.
Okay. So the next one I have a question about is Fund 243, the Cannabis Compliance Fund.
Yes.
And it says to account for revenues and expenditures for the compliance activity. So can you explain to me what that is? What are those compliance activities?
Okay, actually compliance activities for the most part, we have directed to public safety reimbursement. And so that has been what we have utilized that fund for. If there are specific cannabis related compliance issues, we would obviously pay for those first. That is what that particular fund was derived for, is the offset to public safety. We did have a recent discussion about this with respect to whether or not we have quantifiable amounts that we can identify for cannabis related costs, and we'll be looking into that in the future. But right now we don't have any quantifiable items. It is when the measure was placed on the ballot, it was a general tax, so it can be used for any city function or any city operations that are appropriate for what the ballot measure mentioned. And I believe most of it was public safety or offsetting costs for the purpose of anything that was derived from the cannabis business program itself, such as a new business coming in that we have to do background checks, or we have to do any of those things. If we bear the cost of those, that's what that would come from that fund.
Okay. And my last question under that tab, or I think it is, who knows as we go along, is Fund 311. And then this sentence that I'm trying my hardest to make sense of, and I am incapable, and it is used in a number of other funds. And here's what it says. The bonds are not general obligations of the cities payable from the assessments collected from the owners of properties located within the district. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
It feels like there's a comma missing or some preposition missing or something.
There may be a comma missing. I will tell you that. But what these are actually bonds that were issued for improvements. Now, it could have been sewer improvements, it could have been curbs and gutters, it could have been street improvements. Those particular improvements were by that bond that was let many years ago. I believe that was back in 98, maybe 99. And it's for specific purposes. The properties included in that district are levied that tax, and that is used from the property taxes of the property owners to pay off that debt service.
Okay, so these are these Mello-Roos?
They're not all Mello-Roos.
Okay.
They are just assessment districts, and in some cases, community facilities districts.
So where it says, I'm reading that it is not payable from the assessments collected from the owners of properties located within the district. That's what I'm reading it to say. I'm so confused by that. I've read it many times.
They're not general obligations of the city's general fund. They are paid by the property assessments on the individual property owner.
Okay.
And I'll work on putting the comma in there so that's very clear.
And I think it's even more than a comma, but it's used in several of them. And I kept reading it over and over and wanted to understand. So it's used in many of the funds following that specific one. Okay. I thank you very much for all those answers.
I think we can scoot along.
I think Councilmember Jonathan has a question.
Yes.
I do. Thank you.
It's hiding.
I'm trying to find a color that stands out because I know there's.
I was doing good with yellow.
Oh, I'll go back to it. Janet, I have just one question on this slide. It's kind of a 20,000-foot view question. I see, and I know we'll have more discussions about the general fund, but I see that projected revenues are about 52.5 billion. Expenditures, along with intra-fund transfers, are about 59 million. So we're projecting about a $6.5 million deficit. I read recently that La Quinta is projecting a surplus year, not a deficit year. And I'm wondering if you and the rest of our amazing finance team kind of keeps tabs on the other cities. And if you have a sense of, we're going to be the only ones in a deficit, which I don't anticipate, but how do we compare to other cities in the Coachella Valley? And why is it that some cities might enjoy going back to a surplus while we're still stuck in a deficit situation?
Absolutely. We do watch what other cities are doing. Not a lot of cities have been overly out in the press, such as La Quinta. What I can tell you is that La Quinta has something that we're just going to have a very, very high level discussion about later in the presentation. But La Quinta has a special sales tax district tax. And that is a very, it's a very high generating or revenue generating fund for them. So I will look into it a little bit more and have maybe an overview, a very high overview for you at the next meeting with respect to other cities. But I do believe they have a 1% sales tax that they collect in addition to their Bradley Burns from the state.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I forgot about that. And it's always interesting to understand relatively how we stand with other similar cities that are located close to us. So thank you for that.
You are welcome. Okay. You did see this at your last meeting. This is updated from the 423 priorities. As you see, we have funded all of those projects. The general fund impact is shown here in this funding source. That is based on the requests that were made and prioritized. So obviously we can look at those. We will look at those every year to make sure nothing has changed, but this is just that updated slide showing that all of those projects are funded. Okay, we also wanted to share with you today the grants that we have received or that we are actually currently working with projects on. And obviously, as you can tell, we're in the $7 million range. A lot of those are mostly transportation grants. So the transportation grants, these Measure A 213 funds are the ones that are being used for San Pablo. They are also being used for the local roadway safety plan. So we just wanted to share this as an overview with you. And if you had specific questions, we're happy to get the right folks involved to answer your questions. Now, on the community development block grant, I'll just say one thing, and that is that yes, that does look like a high number. We don't usually get that much, but we did get, I believe it's a little bit over $1 million in the last year for coronavirus related assistance, and we used that for rental assistance. We used it for other CDBG programs that were allowed under that program to assist some of our residents. So we won't be seeing that high number again. Just right now, we will see a little bit. I will be getting into the American Rescue Plan Act discussion a little bit later, just to share with you what those monies can be used for that we're expecting. But at least I wanted to share with you that our CDBG number would not be that high, most likely in the next funding cycle.
Councilmember Nastante had a question.
Yes, Janet, on line item 3, Measure A, San Pablo to Mag Falls, that includes the CV link construction. Is that correct?
Actually, I'm not sure that that is part of that grant. I don't believe it is.
I see Andy shaking his head.
It is separate. The 3.222 million is for San Pablo Phase 2, not CV Link.
Okay, thank you. And not the roundabout either, correct?
The roundabout is part of San Pablo Phase 2, yes.
Okay, because we are having a study session on the CV link, which would include the roundabout. And so I just want to point that out, that things potentially might change.
Okay.
Andy, is the roundabout part of the CV Link project, or is that standalone part of San Pablo?
The roundabout is part of the San Pablo Phase 2 project. The only element of CV Link that touches that is a crossing on the west side of that intersection.
So, Councilmember Nastande, this would be the. I just wanted to be sure you were clear that when CV Link comes back, the roundabout's not part of that discussion.
Okay, because I've had discussions with Mr. Kirk about the roundabout in terms of the CV link. So I'll just leave my comments for our study session. Thanks.
Okay.
I think we're good to go.
Okay. We're going to move right into the general fund. And like I said, I'm going to move as quickly as we all would like, because I know there's a few things that will require a little bit more discussion. But I wanted to share some information for you. This is kind of a look back and showing where we are right now. Goes back to 2016, 2017. These are actually budgeted revenues. That's actually the received revenue. This is budgeted expenditures, and those are what we received. Looks like in 1920, we did a really, really good job of making it across the board. However, and that was the beginning of the pandemic, but actually the reason that's so close to all of those numbers is because we did get one-time revenues. So we had anticipated that we would be receiving that much revenue. Then we had one-time revenues that actually offset that. Otherwise, this green line here, if that's what color it is on your screen, it's this second line here, that would have been a lot higher. Moving into 2021, this is what we're estimating. This is what we're expecting. These are both good. Even expenditures matching what we anticipated is good, but we will see a little bump in revenue from what we budgeted, and that is sales tax. Again, you see in 122, I didn't put any actuals in there, obviously, because it would have just been even to what we are proposing or what we expect. Now, as you know, as in the past, I can't stay away from my traditions, and that is that I have to tell you the bad news first. This is what is being projected right now. Revenue is projected at 55.5, expenditure 62 million, and expected shortfall of 6.5. I'm going to go straight into the next slide because I know it's important for us to talk about how we actually are going to cover that if and when things don't pan out the way. If we were to be extremely optimistic and hope that we have a quick and fast recovery in the 21-22 year, and we exceed all things 2021 from the pandemic impacts, we would not be talking about this. But since we are in this situation, we at least need to address if it doesn't come back online a lot faster than what the experts are saying, that we will have to do this. How are we going to cover that estimated shortfall? The very first option is going to be one-time revenue. We're also going to do our best to allocate American Rescue Plan Act dollars to general fund expenditures. And that I'll go into just briefly in the next couple of slides so that you know, because we did get interim final regulations last night late. The next thing we will do is look at our committed reserves from the general fund, and it'll be a plan at the year end, just like we talked about this year, as to what we would take from which reserve in order for it to be the most appropriate for the expenditures that we're offsetting. My recommendation, besides obviously the operating cash, that's why I said committed reserves. I didn't say assigned reserves. I know that's a accounting technical issue, but I say that because assigned reserves can be used without council action. Committed reserves must take council action. The emergency contingency reserve is a committed reserve, but my recommendation would be that would be the last one that we would use, even though we're certainly in an emergency situation. The reason I say that is because, as we all know, and I've said, probably tell folks don't like talking about it, there could be a different type of emergency that happens here in the desert, and we would be concerned that we would not have money to help with life services at that time. So this is my initial recommendation. I will be bringing back to you in a few months when we close our year, our recommendations for the close of 2021, looking at those reserves. So we're going to be looking at them again. You'll see them far before we get into a good part of our year next year when our season hits. So you will be able to see what our reserves are looking like. We'll also know a lot more about the ARPA funds and how we can allocate them. The last item number. Yes.
Councilmember Jonathan had a hand up, and then Councilmember Quintanilla.
I can let Janet finish. I just have two quick questions on this slide, but maybe I better let Janet finish first.
Okay, just the last item is something we'll talk about later on down the road. Councilmember Jonathan actually mentioned it earlier with respect to another city. So we're just going to be looking at the options that we might have available to us. But with that, Councilmember Jonathan, you had some questions?
Thank you. Two quick questions. I'll touch on that one first, which is new revenue sources a euphemism for tax increases, sales tax or TOT?
All in the way you look at it.
Okay. The second question is, you're projecting revenue of 55.5 million. And I'm just curious how you and Luis looked at special events that tend to fatten our coffers, whether that's Coachella, Stagecoach, tennis tournament, food and wine, fashion week. How have you
Yes.
incorporated those special events into your projection of revenue for this coming year?
You know, what we did is
By the way, you can start your response by saying, excellent question.
Yeah, excellent question, Councilman Jonathan. So we did consider events, nothing like we had done in the past. And I say that with this respect. Still, a small Coachella is contemplated. And by that, we're looking at the TOT impacts of that, which are not going to be nearly as great, because at least all the indicators are that they haven't canceled it in 22 yet. I think they canceled for 21. They have not canceled completely for 22, but 100,000 people is probably unlikely. So that will have an impact on TOT. And as far as sales tax, it will also have an impact on the sales tax revenue, only because there won't be as many people here. So yes, that's there, but just like this year, we didn't have one and we planned for a very small one. However, sales tax actually rebounded a little bit, because during that little period of time when the stores were open and as long as you were masked, you could go to them, we saw an uptick in sales in December, which was very good for us. So there's, like I said, a smaller version of Coachella, the tennis tournament. I think we're watching those again, and I would love to absolutely come back to you in the middle of the year and make a recommendation to increase the expectations for revenue based on the planned events. But right now, based on what they've communicated, is it's going to be a much smaller, everything's going to be much smaller, which will have an impact.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that you incorporated a little bit of revenue for the various special events, but should they occur certainly in full bloom, that would potentially result in an increase in actual revenues versus projected.
Yes, it would.
Well, let's hope for all sorts of reasons that happens. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Councilmember Quintanilla had a question.
I had a question the previous slide, but I wanted to find the right place to stop and ask, because I know Janet has a lot to get through. And I was just thinking, with knowing that Coachella, if again, fingers crossed for some of these events to return and having recuperating some of that TOT, I was connecting a few different things that Councilmember Jonathan mentioned and looking at what our sister cities are doing. And I can't help but wonder, what are some of the other ways that they are leading the curve on where could we get some more inspiration, and not necessarily just go and look at what they're all doing to copy, but to find what works. And I'm wondering, realistically, we have to look at how to address that 6.5 million deficit. And I'm wondering if you can let us know how much of that has been specifically the impact of reducing short-term rentals.
Well, the quick answer as far as short-term rentals is it may not have. I do have a slide where we talk about TOT, and I can get to that and maybe come back to that question, because people are, we have seen an uptick in our revenue for STRs. However, I'm not sure if I have data. This is something that I'm looking at as a new process, but I'm not sure I have data as to whether that's an increase in average daily rate per night or more people coming more days. And that certainly would have an impact on whether or not it was because we had less short-term rentals that the prices went up, or if we have just people want short-term rentals and it could be a lot more. But if we can go to that slide in a couple of minutes, maybe I can expand on that just a little bit if I haven't hit your question.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. I look forward to the rest of that.
And one last thing, Janet, before we get too depressed about 6.5, remind us what you were projecting 1 year ago.
Yes, 1 year ago was 10.1 shortfall. And we have revised that figure because we did receive more sales tax than we anticipated. But at the same time, we're still being conservative, but I think what you'll see is we have seen an uptick in that revenue. And if you remember, our revenue expectation last year was about 48 million, and this year it's 55 million. So that's actually a significant increase in revenue expectation from last year to this year.
Terrific. On that happy note, we can move on.
Okay, this was a quick slide I threw in today, so this won't be in your packet if you didn't update your slides. I'm just throwing this out there quickly because we did get the final, well, what do they call them? The interim final regulations on the American Rescue Plan Act, which is ARPA's, and basically they're saying what you can and can't use this for. Public health emergency was the number one. I'm going to look at that a little more in detail to see if that's something or if there's anything that can be quantified on our side with the types of things that we've done and whether or not we can apply this money towards that. Revenue loss, for certainly we can be looking at that. The one good thing I can tell you is that this is based on the difference between the 18-19 year and the current year. And when I go to the slide talking about overall revenue, for the last 5 years, you'll see why that's a good thing. It does have an escalation percentage. And so the escalation percentage is, they gave us a 4.1 or the average of what the previous full 3 years change in revenue was, that we can escalate that for our revenue loss. So again, the one thing that they do indicate is that you can't just put this in your reserves. So again, we will have to offset with respect to general fund costs, but we have a lot of those that we think will be eligible. So you will see once we get a better handle on exactly how they're going to allow us to apply those, we will let the council know. It'll also be used for other negative impacts. The one that I want to bring your attention to, there's actually two. One is this small business right here. These are Unite Palm Desert programs. So it may be that you can replenish that program, either what we have spent, what we intend to spend, could potentially also include Invest Palm Desert, because some of our Invest Palm Desert was business retention. So we'll be looking at that and working with Martine on that. Rehiring government staff, that's just something that I throw out there because we did hold our hiring until very recently, so it's possible. But the one I really wanted to point out was the very last one, which is broadband. Now, this is talking about infrastructure that responds to the specific pandemic public health need. Obviously, the city of Palm Desert and many places has it has internet connection. Whether it's as good as broadband and or high level broadband, that could be that's an infrastructure project that could be utilized for this particular funding source. Now, having said that, I certainly believe that the 75,000 that you saw on the original slide that we were talking about our study, I certainly believe that this can be applied to that, as that is projected to come from the general fund. So I just wanted to share this as very overview. And again, like I said, it's 151 pages of fun that we're going to have going through that to make sure that we are crossing our I's and dotting our T's to get that money. I do also know that we're in the process right now of filling out the application to request those dollars. So we're moving on that. Now, here's the slide. I will tell you this slide is about 24 hours old, which means it's old news. This American Rescue Plan Act money 5.1 has been reduced. The final allocation was less than that to Palm Desert, but not by a lot. It's 4.99. So just a little bit, not a lot. But I kind of explained this a little bit. This is our financial 5-year forecast. We've talked about this before. It is something that we keep up to date. I try to do it at least with the budget, but I usually do it once a quarter just to kind of keep track on where we are. Our estimated revenue for the next few years is the first line. Our estimated expenditures is the second line, telling you what our new expectation for this current fiscal year is 6.9 instead of the 10.1. This coming year, 6.5, and then you see that dwindle off. Now, I also believe that a lot can happen, and I'm going to caveat that in about 50 different ways that I don't need to verbalize. A lot can happen between now and even the next fiscal year. Just in looking at the ways that our economy recovers, we may be a very, very highly sought after tourist destination, because people don't have to fly. And also, you know, we have a lot to offer. I'm sure you've seen commercials on television right now that are encouraging Californians to vacation in California. So there's a lot of really good marketing promotional things that are kind of pushing people to places right here. What we have seen, and I know actually Todd communicated to me that he had firsthand knowledge of this, but I had also received this feedback as well. The Marriott the JW is hopping, it's full. There's people everywhere, which is a wonderful sign. It's a beautiful location for an actually destination vacation without getting on an airplane. So we have that in at least we've looked at that with respect to how we would come back from that with respect to tourism. The other thing that the money from the American Rescue Plan Act can be used for is a loss to an industry such as tourism or things like that. So that's something else that we're going to be looking at. So I'll leave it there. We do have one-time revenue this year that will help us offset. And then this is the 2021 year. That's the current year we're in. We have one-time revenues, and then we have the Plan Act money. If we're not able to use the Plan Act money this year, our general fund balance would be about 87 million. There is some restricted funds in that, but that's roughly the number. The American Rescue Plan Act would then be placed in a fund, in a restricted fund, until we can apply the rest of those categories to that and reimburse the general fund. But if we do get it and we're able to apply it towards any of the shortfall, then this could be the impact on the general fund. Councilmember Jonathan has a question.
Thank you, Janet. Great news, great job, amazing. My question to you is, you talked about the possibility that our hospitality industry may explode in a positive way as pent-up demand for travel hopefully returns. And we've talked about this before, about whether or not our marketing efforts through the CVB, through our own city and so forth, are directed at that very goal, which is to get our drive market to ease into travel by coming to the Coachella Valley and specifically to Palm Desert and spend their travel, vacation, tourist dollars here. I don't think this is necessarily the time and place to dig, to go deeply into that. So I would leave it to Todd if maybe you want to follow up with a brief report from Thomas or whatever, just kind of answering that question, or feel free to address it now. But I'm just wondering if we're taking the initiative in that regard.
I'd like to, I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, I would like to have Thomas, I know that Todd probably has been talking to Thomas about this. I would like to have Thomas discuss this with you.
Mayor Pro Tem Arnick, did you want to weigh in on that topic or something else?
I did. I'll just give a quick and broad overview, and I'm sure there can be more details provided. But both the CVB and the city's marketing efforts are definitely focused on our 25 million person drive market. They recognize that there is plenty right here, and they are really working on that, plus the concerted effort within the valley, so that when people arrive here and perhaps they're in another city, they know that they want to come to Palm Desert. So there is a very strong effort in that direction, but I'm sure more details can follow.
Well, I feel like you just gave the perfect summation of that. We are indeed targeting the drive market. We've saved a lot of our advertising dollars throughout this year The keyword has been pivot all year. Our media plan, we've been changing it up on the fly with what was available. So we are now unleashing pretty much the full force of that on the drive market. We've started a campaign called Healing Heroes that's initially focused on those folks who've been working on the front line in healthcare, telling them, you know, we know that they need a break. This is a great place for a break. There's a reason that people come to the desert to relax and rejuvenate, and this is the place for that. It's right in line with Palm Desert's brand, especially as opposed to Palm Springs. So we feel like this was a great opportunity. That marketing campaign will then, we actually launched it last week in line with the National Nurses Week, and that ends tomorrow. So we'll be morphing that into a general campaign back to Find Your Happy Pace. We're featuring that with specials from every hotel I could scrounge in Palm Desert, their summer specials. And this will be running through July 31st. So in the coming weeks, we'll be featured on KTLA on their news programs, some unscripted stuff that they've got. We've got billboards running in LA, Orange County, and San Diego. A great one in San Diego with a flamingo head coming off the board. So I'm kind of excited to see that. So a lot of creative things that we've been able to do to really target that drive market, because we do feel like there's going to be a huge demand. We also know we have a lot of competition, and some of that competition is places like Santa Barbara, which is sandwiched between the ocean and the mountains and doesn't give you that open expansiveness that we have here in Palm Desert. So Palm Desert is really right in line with what people are looking for, and we want to make sure that everybody knows they can come here and recover.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move on if there's not any other questions, at least on this slide. And I'm going to show you just kind of a graphic of what I just showed you. This shows what our estimated revenue and expenditures are over the next 5 years. It shows you this, these are just lines showing you that we do anticipate they're going to go up. But this bright blue line here is the estimated general fund balance if we're not able to use the ARPA funds for general fund expenditures. And this brown line here is if we are able to. So graphic showing you what it looks like. Obviously, it's still well above 100% of our anticipated expenditures, which at one time was what our reserve goal was. Okay, now to give you just a little bit, another graphic. I'm sorry, I went a little crazy with the graphics this year, but to give you another graphic, this is actually going back to 17-18, all revenue for the general fund. You have a legend out to the right. It shows you that our largest, of course, as it anticipated, is sales tax and TOT. What you can see is you can see that our sales tax is pretty consistent. Yes, it went down in 1920, that when everything was closed. It's coming back a little bit in 2021. But what you can also see is how much our TOT took a hit from 1819 to 1920. And we're going to come back out of that slowly. I'm hoping that it comes back a little bit faster, just even based on what Thomas just shared with you. And that's what we're hoping. But at least in the 21-22 year, it's just a slight increase. Other than that, you can see that most of the rest of the revenues are very consistent. They don't change a lot. Estate payments changed just a little bit, but like I said, they're just not enough to make a big difference. Going this direction, I'll show you, this is actually those same categories and with a bunch of numbers on a page showing you the same information, obviously the biggest one being sales tax, but you can see a trend here with respect to TOT. We budgeted 8.5 thinking that we would have a small Coachella, and we're estimating that'll be 7.1 this year because we did not expect the closure that was in December, and we did have an impact from that. Again, I'm hoping that it comes back around. We did see a lot of people in the Marriott in April, which was unusual because normally by April, a lot of people are going home. We see slowdown. This year, we kind of saw a little uptick in April. So that's that's a good thing. I won't have specific April numbers until the end of May because they don't have to pay their TOT until the end of May, but at least word on the street is that they were busy. So that's a good sign. Sharing again, the top 3 revenue sources for the city are property tax, TOT, and sales tax. Now, property tax is kind of a misnomer. It is a large amount, but this is based on what the county, it's a percentage of the overall property tax collected within the city of Palm Desert based on an allocation that the county of Riverside had to make to Palm Desert way back in 1978 after Prop 13 was passed. So it is a top revenue source. We do get about $7-8 million from this, but I just share it kind of doesn't fluctuate. What I can tell you is this year is the first year, and I do not know. I know it's over 10, not positive if it's a lot more than that, but this is the first time that property tax increase is not going to be the statutory 2%. It's going to be less than that. The county indicated that it's going to be 1%. Now, we've also seen a very large uptick in property sales in Palm Desert. We know that things come on the market, they sell very quickly. We won't see the impacts of that for a couple of years. The county is behind in that, and by the time the tax roll drops, we don't have a lot of that sales data in order for them to project the next sales year or the next property tax year. So we won't see that, I don't believe, until 22, 23. But you can see that, like I said, that is significant. Now, going back here, again, this is TOT, and you can see that we're kind of on an even incline, but not as drastic as we'd like to see, getting back to where we were. Going into sales tax, looking at sales tax, this is actually telling you by the sales tax sector. So this gives you the information from general retail, food products and transportation, construction, business to business, and miscellaneous. Obviously, general retail still holds the top bill on this. It tells you that we do receive a significant amount from general retail here in Palm Desert. Food products, you can see the dip here between 18-19 and the 19-20 year, and then obviously we're staying consistent going forward. But from the 18-19 year, the food products was, and obviously that's restaurants and things like that. That took a hit because our restaurants were closed. So the programs that are instilled through the Invest Palm Desert and also the Unite Palm Desert program, they're aimed at the right entities, it looks, when you look at it this way. So the retail sectors here, or these other sectors, they pretty much stay consistent. Don't really see a lot of change in those. Now, here's the TOT slide that I was kind of referring to earlier. And the reason I kind of wanted to wait for this was because it does show you that, our STRs in 17, 18, and 18, 19 are pretty consistent. If you look over here to the 21, 22, and actually are projected for the 2021, it's actually getting very close to these numbers. So I believe and I am sorry, it's slipping my mind exactly when TOTs were restricted to certain locations. I believe it was 12/30 of 19. It might have been extended, but I believe that was the date. If that was the date, that happened during this fiscal year, and that was also the pandemic year. So it's hard to see that impact. But again, we are seeing an uptick. So it's what I can tell you is we have about 700 permits, and we used to have about 1,200. But you can see the revenue from that is pre-pandemic, pre-change in that STR ordinance. So does that answer your question, Councilmember Quintanilla? Or would you like, I can look at it a little further in depth if you want to let me know what you're looking for, and we can get back to you at the next meeting if that.
Absolutely. At the next time would be perfectly fine. I greatly appreciate. Thank you. And I appreciate the level of detail. I love the presentations. They are spectacular.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go into general fund expenditures, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of this information just very high level, and then actually what we're going to be doing is requesting that the department heads be elevated. and to give you some of their input on the things that they've done over the last year, things that they're going to do next year. This is by category. If you remember last year, I kind of introduced this particular method of showing you general fund expenditures as opposed to departmental expenditures. It really gives you a perspective of what the most expensive thing is to us, police services being the one. I've also shown it to you in a pie graph here so that you can kind of get a perspective this way. This is police, this is salaries, this is transfers out, and this is benefits. So you can look over here at a lot of the other expenses that the general fund has are really minimal compared to these several categories here. Move right into department budgets. And with, unless I'm sorry, I'm going to go back because
Jonathan.
Thank you. I see police services there, and I don't see fire because I assume that's in the transfers out. When we talk about the general fund, it's really the deficit that we need to fund out of general fund. Do you have an idea out of the 13%, what represents fire?
Half
Okay.
of that 13%. It's about 4 million, and our transfers out are about 8 million.
Okay, so roughly 38, 39% is police and fire. And that's a percentage of total expenditures, not of our revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so because revenues are lower, it'd be an even higher percentage if we compare it to what percentage. In other words, what I'm getting at is what is the percentage of our revenues that is being spent on police and fire?
I can do that math and let you know.
Okay, at some point.
Soon. How's that?
Thank you. It doesn't have to be soon, just whenever it's convenient. That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Now that's one thing that I cannot master is talking and doing math in my head at the same time. So I just say, I'll share that. Okay. So I'm going to move.
I have a quick question on that as well, if I may.
Of course.
My question is in regards also to the police services budget. I was not able to find a lot of elaborate detail in the report, and I was wondering if there's any way that we could find out of all of that, just like our budget is broken down, where it all goes, how much of police services are going to vehicles and patrols, and just to give the community a sense of where this is going, it would be wonderful.
Okay. What I can tell you is I know that Lori Carney and Steve Arian are listening to the presentation today, and on the 26th, it is dedicated to public safety. So I will make sure that if they didn't hear that part of it, that we share that, and so that they can give you as much breakdown as we have or get more.
Thank you greatly.
And Councilmember Jonathan.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to the follow-up, when we do review public safety, in addition to what we're spending our funds on in detail, if we can get the most recent crime data for the city of Palm Desert, hopefully historically, so for the last 3 or preferably 5 years, it's always helpful to compare what we're spending as to the rate of crime. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have to give a shout out to Mr. Espinoza. He did the math for me. It's 43.2% of revenue is public safety.
Awesome. You guys are quick. Thank you so much.
He didn't have to talk. Mayor Pro Tem Arnick.
Okay, and to just piggyback on Councilmember Jonathan's comment, broken out into categories of crime so that we really have a good understanding, please.
Yeah, I think they use the standard FBI format, which does exactly that. And thank you for pointing that out, Mayor Pro Tem. I totally concur.
Okay. All right. I do that. Okay, again, this is by department. This shows you how it's broken out specifically by department and how it compares to the adopted 2021 budget. After this slide, what I will share with you is I have the same pie chart, just broken up in a different way. And again, you can tell that the majority is police services interfund transfers. Then we move into the Public Works Department being the majority. Now this is broken down, like I said, by department. So this does give you Public Works, General Services. General Services is a lot, and that is because, or it shows up in the higher end of this list because of the fact that we pay our required PERS payment from that. So
From which, again, Janet? Does that
that's our required PERS payment. Let me go back up just a second because I believe that I have it on this slide. The required PERS annual premium is 3.6 roughly. And that is considered a general services payment. So that's why our general services department is such a large part of the city's funds.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we go into, Todd has made some changes with our organizational framework here and how we are functioning as departments. Give you an overview. I know it's in your charts. I won't read them to you, but he did kind of break this out into kind of 5 areas: economic development, finance, development services, public works. And this is really city administration over here. City clerk, city manager, human resources, and information technology. So this is the framework by which we'll be showing you the budgets departmentally. And I'm going to go to this slide, which kind of shares with you in the 1920 year, we had budgeted 112 positions. At the end of this year, we will have budgeted 105 positions. And in the 21-22 year, we've made some efficiencies. We'll be hiring a couple of new positions just based on the new framework. So that is the only change. This is based on the realigned structure. So the reason this is comparable in the way that you see these, even though maybe those structures weren't the same, is what I did is we actually took those functions and I put them in the 1920 category that they would go to. So in other words, the city manager, even though city clerk was separated from them, I did include them in the city manager for 1920, just to give you a perspective of how this aligns. So and really the 2 departments that have increases in staff, this is an executive assistant, and this from 17 to 18, and from 29 to 30 is a principal planner. The rest of these changes, this actually is a movement in staff. There's a person that was moved, and there's a management analyst that is being moved from the city manager's department into the economic development department. Public Works is making some efficiencies with respect to their overall makeup, and they are looking at potentially 33 positions, which is what causes the majority of this reduction from 112 to 107. So with that, I'm going to go right into the city manager. This is what I'll do is I'll explain kind of the framework for which these slides are built, and then I will ask each of the department heads to jump in kind of and explain theirs. This is the city manager. This again is your full-time positions. It does talk about how many are vacant, and that is across all of these categories. So city administration, city clerk, human resources, and IT. There are currently 4 vacant. Now I say currently, that could change any day because we do have recruitments that are out, that are closed, that we're currently going through the actual interview process or soon to be going through that. So with that, Andy, I'm going to ask you to kind of go through the rest of it. It's, I'm sorry, comprised of the positions, but also the successes, the initiatives, and any cost containment measures that the departments actually undertook during the last fiscal year and possibly the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Janet. So as I lead into some of the department's successes, I think it is important to note that these are organizational successes. Many departments, many staff across the organization were involved in these. They may have been led or facilitated by the city manager's office or some of the divisions within the city manager's office. Over the last year, while we've been in the pandemic, except for a very short period of time, the city has been in continuous operation, and that is due in large part to the teams within the city manager's office. IT in particular, they have worked to enable our remote work operations. They have procured and implemented the laptops, the web cameras, the Zoom technology, all of the training that we have needed in order to continue to work. We're more on site today than we have been in the past, but for that long summer when we were largely remote. They've figured out how to enable remote work. We also look at the COVID-19 response. We have worked with the CDBG and CARES Act funds to provide additional support throughout the community, and as well looking at other work that we have conducted over this period of time. The all mail ballot election in the fall was a significant accomplishment, a significant achievement for the city clerk's office while we were in the pandemic. There's been a lot of back of house work conducted by the IT department, a lot of server and network upgrades that have enabled a lot of the work that we do and will set us up for future and sustained success. We're continuing to work on many of these initiatives. We are currently in the quality assurance quality check process for Laserfiche. This is a tool that will help us internally as well as externally as we're trying to provide records and content both to the organization and to the public. As well, I mentioned earlier that we are looking at an agenda management and staff report workflow solution. This also spills over into the cost containment measures and what we're doing to make ourselves more efficient. I think this will play a large part in our future. Right now, we're working to select that vendor, working to select that software, but over the coming fiscal year, that business process improvement will be a significant project, a significant change for the organization. We've spoken a lot about recruitments. There are many recruitments that are underway right now, and some of those I hope that we'll be able to get in place before the end of this fiscal year, but recruitments don't stop once you make the hire. You need to successfully onboard them into the organization and really integrate them into the culture that is the city of Palm Desert. So that is very much an ongoing exercise that we'll have throughout the upcoming fiscal year. Todd has also organized and stood up the one-stop shop, integrating planning, engineering, building into one location. That change has been made, but as we open up to the public, it is our intent to have that counter and to be able to really improve those processes. So that's another change that Todd has laid. We are also aware that we need to put out an RFP for the Desert Willow Golf Resort management. That is a major initiative that we have coming up this year, along with the website redesign and some other HR human resource initiatives. With that, I'll open up to any questions that council may have on the slide.
Don't see any. You are quite thorough. Thank you, Andy.
And this is just another view of the departments, and based on the new structure, the new organizational structure, what's under the city manager's department. This kind of shares with you all of the different budgets that fall under this category. So again, it's just the same information, just in a different format, so that you can see what, impact based on the hierarchy of the new organization looks like. With that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to development services, and I'm going to ask Eric Seha to share his thoughts with you.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, and good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Development Services is a reimagined department for the City of Palm Desert. It's essentially merged our former building and safety functions in with the Community Development Department, which includes now land development, planning and engineering, our housing, Parks and Rec, our new one-stop shop or Palm Desert Permit Center, as well as co-compliance and business licensing. Really the big successes that we had last year are listed on here, but two that we're quite proud of is we adapted pretty quickly to go to virtual meetings. And given the various commissions that our department serves, we felt that this was quite a big accomplishment working with Art and Public Places, the Planning Commission, Architectural Review, Housing, and the Parks Commission as well. We also pivoted pretty quickly in getting online plan submittals and reviews done within that first month that we were asked to work remotely. That has helped us pretty significantly in continuing our work with the public and contractors and getting permits in-house, reviewed, and out the door. Some of the major accomplishments for each division are listed on the screen. With planning and land development, we're quite proud of the outdoor dining program that was in place. We see those dining decks now on El Paseo, Highway 111, and throughout the city, as well as the creation of Blue Pine Plaza, which was a joint effort with our marketing and economic development department, as well as our public works department. With the Parks and Recreation, we've continued to work with DRD for testing sites and food drives and blood drives. There's also been a number of improvements made to the city's Aquatic Center. Our co-compliance department has been quite busy. They're really out in the community. They've been educating the public and the business community, keeping them apprised of some of the governor's orders and changes that have been going on throughout the year. And of course, they've been quite busy with the short-term rental compliance, as well as some of the administrative hearings and citations that have been occurring throughout the year. With building and safety, you can see we've issued over 3,000 permits. There's been about 2,000 final inspections that have been completed. We've also expedited a number of our processes to get permits in and out the door as quickly as possible, particularly as that relates to solar permitting. And with Art in Public Places, which is now relocated with economic development, we facilitated the process for the San Pablo Roundabout artwork, as well as the El Paseo sculpture exhibition. And participating with economic development, we installed 2 Unite Palm Desert murals in the city. I'll get the next slide, please.
Eric, quick question. How does that 3,000 permits compare to prior years?
You know, I don't have that number, but I can pull the reports from previous years and we can get that information back to you.
Great. And Councilmember Jonathan.
Yes, thank you. Just on this slide, Eric, by the way, lots of successes, and thank you for that reminder, because we all tend to focus on what needs fixing and instead of the fixing that has been done. So thank you for that. I want to ask you about the online plan submittal and permit review for planning and building. So I think it's wonderful. The more we migrate towards being customer centric and facilitating development rather than being obstacles to development, the better. And I know that that has been a focus. My question to you is, looking ahead, you know, we've talked about some of the issues associated with outsourcing this process and how that has been counterproductive. Does staff continue to focus on that, and can we expect to see changes ahead?
Absolutely. This is a continual focus. So this isn't a one-time effort for us. We are reviewing all of our existing policies, seeing what changes need to be made. We have consultants that we have hired and are working with now to realize some of those efficiencies. And I think the big goal with the new Development Services Department, as well as the Permit Center, is to really enhance cooperation amongst staff to make sure that work is getting out the door, essentially.
All right, very good, thank you. And I hope we welcome feedback from our developer community, because they're the best report card. And you know, the ones I've spoken to, none are interested in changing and certainly not lowering Palm Desert standards, but just understanding them, meeting them, and then being allowed to move on. So I think listening to our development community is very important in this process. And I assume you're doing that actually, but thank you.
I'll elaborate a bit more in the next slide on that.
Mayor Pro Tem Harnick.
This is easy. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated the comments that Eric just made about the staff and their attitude towards this. Thank you.
All right, then I'll get the next slide. Because we do have a number of divisions, we also have our housing division, which you can imagine during the pandemic with changes in eviction moratoriums and staying on top of that legislation. The housing division has also secured rental assistance upwards of $175,000 for Palm Desert residents. And we've entered into 2 agreements, one with the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition for self-help lots, and then with Palm Communities on another 220 apartment site in the Northern Sphere. Both of these projects will help the city achieve its regional housing needs assessment and our goals in the housing element. Look at the next slide. And so our major initiatives moving forward are to build our team and our department now across our different divisions, but really to solidify that Palm Desert Permit Center. And as Mr. Jonathan had mentioned about customer satisfaction surveys are developed. We've actually sent those out going back, I think this past year, soliciting feedback from the development community and people that have submitted permits to the city to get their feedback. And we will continue to do that weekly. And we will hope to, our goal is to provide monthly reports to the city council on the survey results. So that'll be coming your way as well. We'll be focusing next on our business licensing submittal and approval process. Just at this next council meeting, you'll see a contract for HDL to move our business licensing services electronically through an online portal, which will significantly help our business community obtain these permits much more expeditiously, as well as you'll see a program proposal for outdoor dining decks that we'll need city council feedback on as well. Cost containment measures, we cut essential or non-essential services and projects, and we are now focusing on contracting for temporary employment, particularly as we solidify our teams, not knowing the exact space that we'll end up at. Right now, we are looking across the board and reviewing a request for a range of support services to help us move forward. And that's my report.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, again, here is the slide that shows you the departments that are within the division that Eric is overseeing right now. The one thing I'll just point out is the very first one that's kind of glaring on the page, which is animal regulation, $341,000. This is the same budget that we have in the 2021 year. However, we did get notified from the county that they are increasing their rates. We looked at it and we're going to go ahead and keep the budget the same because based on the rates and based on what they've been charging us for, we think we can cover it with this, but just keep that in mind. It may actually go up during the year. We may have to come back and request a revision to that. So again, that's development services. And now,
Janet.
Yes.
Would this be a good time for a comfort break?
I was going to say that I was looking forward to talking so much that, it's my turn. But yes, right now is a perfect time for a break.
And you can wet your whistle. All right, let's take 10.
Okay, back at it. As you know, as part of the restructuring, finance and administrative services were merged. So this slide has information from both of those departments and things that we did. The very first thing I want to say is that this year we were able to successfully implement online payments for both incoming and outgoing ACH. This is a big step forward for us. We worked with our bank to make sure that we have fraud preventions in place, but we are now able to authorize and allow payments to go out to some of our larger vendors via ACH and also incoming vendors such as TOT paying online, and we receive that money overnight. Which is a benefit to them because all they have to do is email their return. They don't have to make sure it gets in the mail before the end of the workday and back to us so that we can process their payment. The other thing is the success from administrative services is the pandemic response. We've really done a lot of things during the last 18 months, obviously, and obviously more recently with our outbreak. But it's a success because one of the things, we could go into it a little bit more, but one of the things when Lori sent out a request or a survey to the staff was to actually tell us that they felt comfortable with the security and the safety measures that the city has put in place for people to be returning to City Hall. So that's a very positive thing. And also the things that we have done with respect to our exposure response and safety protocols. So if you want more information on that in particular, we can provide that at the next meeting as part of public safety. But that is one of the things that was a success this year, something good coming out of something that was difficult. So also CFD refunding, the new issue for University Park. This has gone on for quite some time, and we are getting closer and closer to wrapping it up and getting in the final stages. Still a few more actions to take, but we're very happy with the process that it took. This is a lot of legs. We also have another one that's going to be an initiative for next year, but this was a very multifaceted refunding and new issue, and so we are actually getting very close, like I said, and working very closely with the developer and all of our ancillary finance team to get the best response or best outcome from that refunding that we possibly can for them. Initiatives for next year. One of the biggest ones that finance has always grappled with is digital signature acceptance. We're going to be looking at this over the next 12 months because we want to make sure that any documents that we have that need to be digitally signed are done so with certifications behind them and ensuring that we have the documentation that we need in order to ensure that that was a legal and I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but a legal expense of the city, and that we actually were authorized to make that payment. The other thing that's really exciting, and I'm hoping to be able to roll out at least a preview of this at the June council meeting when you adopt the budget, is an online budget. It is interactive, it's through OpenGov, and you should be able to look for anything that you need budget related with respect to departments, and you can find it in OpenGov. We're currently developing that. Right now we have a finance template that we'll be rolling out with the rest of the departments, but it is something that we will be working on all year next year to try to refine and get it so that it is both interactive internally and also externally, so that the public can take a look. If they want to see what police services are, they can. If they want to see what our revenues are and where they come from, they can. And that's really a transparency initiative that we really want to make sure that people, usually what they want to know is information from finance, think it's too difficult to get to. So we're trying to make it a lot easier. The other thing as far as an initiative next year is it's really going to kind of happen this year and cross over into next year, but that's the finance side of the implementation of online business license. There's a lot of moving parts on both sides of the coin on that. The finance side of it is going to be more related to the deposits of the actual payments, but also the banking relationships and the merchant relationships that we have to create in order for that to happen. So that's an initiative that we'll be undertaking it's almost immediate actually, but we'll be working through that as the time goes in the first part of the next year. As far as cost containment, what I can say, I already mentioned incoming and outgoing ACHs. What I can also tell you is that was a huge, it actually is a big cost containment measure because we don't write checks and we're not spending the time. It may not necessarily be cost containment. That's why I added efficiencies in there, is because it actually is an efficient measure of getting those processed a lot faster. And so right now what we're doing, as you know, during the pandemic, we are only processing checks every other week, but we're also trying to process outgoing ACHs in the off week from the check run. So that may be merged into one at some point, but right now that's pretty much what we're doing. And lastly, digital approvals. for the staff of the city. They know how difficult it is to get processing paperwork to the finance department, when they have to have wet signatures, and there's people that are either working remotely or out of the office. We're working on a plan to do digital approvals that'll help us and help the department get those processed a lot faster. And with that, I here again is this slide. Just point out again that this is our required payment. What I will tell you is that this payment amount, the 3.6, is actually down from a few years back. And the reason it's reduced from prior years and payments that we've made in prior years was because when times were good, we were making payments into PERS to bring down our unfunded pension liability, and that we are seeing an impact now. It may only be a couple $100,000, but especially at this point in time, it was very helpful that we were able to make those payments then. Our insurance costs are going up a little bit, so you will see a rise when you look in your book. The difference between last year and this year, our insurance costs are going up, and that's just the nature of our claims. So with that, I will switch to this slide, and what this tells me is what I wanted to share with you, and that is this section right down here, which is the transfers out. We've noticed that was an $8.1 million transfer out from the general fund to other funds. I wanted to share the breakdown of this with you because I think it's telling as to what that is actually made up of. Again, as I mentioned, it was $4 million to the fire fund, and actually $830,000 from the economic development fund for the programs that we have developed and that we might be modifying a little bit, known as Invest Palm Desert. Unite Palm Desert is what we shifted to during the pandemic, but I believe that we're looking at kind of reigniting the Invest Palm Desert plan, and that's where right now we're looking at $830,000. That's the balance of the amount that was allocated in the economic development committed reserve within the general fund. And Councilmember Harnick has a question. Mayor Pro Tem Harnick.
I'll wait until you're through.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Equipment replacement, that's pretty much a standard transfer for the equipment that gets replaced on and off. This is an anticipation, but usually it has a lot to do with IT. And I know that we had some things that we're going to be doing with respect to IT based on a recent review of their services and their equipment. So that's pretty standard. And also Aquatic Center shortage. This is bigger than it's been. And this is bigger than it's been in the past, and it's bigger than it's been. I would probably have to ask Eric to get back in line and kind of share with you their thoughts on that, or come back to you at the next meeting on why that is. But the pool was closed, and I do know that as we've all probably heard in the news, the chlorine cost is going up, and there's a shortage of it. So there's a lot of things that are impacting that number, and we haven't had as many. I'm not sure if they've limited the number of people in the pool, but that could have an impact on the revenue there. And then lastly, the other ones are annual transfers that we do, that if you want more information, I can provide that at the next meeting, but those are pretty standard. Those are the ones that we do every year. This is a retiree stipend and a yearly contribution to our other post-employment benefits, otherwise known as OPEB. We do make that $969,935. It includes both of those payments. So at some point we are fully funded, but at some point we will just be making a yearly contribution in order to make those payments, because they will be coming from that fund. And so Councilmember Harnick, or Mayor Pro Tem Harnick, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you did answer part of my question on the Aquatic Center, so I'm glad I waited. But remind me, please, the financial model for the Aquatic Center was that we would generate 60% of the cost. Is that it? Or was it that we generated 40% of the, or which one was it?
I believe we expected to cover 60%, but I also believe that this number includes Luis, I know you're on. Do you remember, does this include capital, any capital in this transfer, or is it all operations?
All operations.
Okay, so this is a direct result of the pandemic and the issues that are anticipated because of that, and also the cost of chlorine.
Thank you.
So if it's covering loss of admissions, that might have implications for American Rescue Act eligibility.
Yes. That's why I said we're really going to take a comprehensive look at that, and we are really. It's not going to be a quick and dirty. We're really going to look at every possible way of utilizing the funds for things that come from the general fund that the general fund is actually offsetting, and that's going to be what we're tasked with. I didn't put that on the initiatives for next year, but it's there. That's in the underlying all those other things that finance is going to do. Also contributions, this $240,000 dues, I'll just mention that that's the Joslin Center contribution that we make annually. Kind of didn't really go. That's kind of one of those things that we had to just put in contributions because it is part of, I believe it's part of our COVE responsibilities. So with that, I'm going to move on to Public Works unless someone has questions on finance.
I know it's probably a drop in the bucket, but back to the Aquatic Center, that Aquatic Center gets used by residents of our surrounding cities. And I don't believe, I could be wrong, Janet, correct me if I'm wrong, do they pitch in very much, if at all, for their residents that benefit from the Aquatic Center?
There is a rate for residents and a rate for a non-resident. I don't know what those are off the top of my head. I could probably.
I meant the cities, like the city of La Quinta, the city of Indio, and their budgets. Do they help? Because perhaps that's something we explore moving forward, because I believe a lot of their residents do use it.
They do not contribute to that, but I think we can talk to Eric about talking to Jennifer and see. My guess is, I think La Quinta has their own pool. So my guess is that they would not want to do that unless we contributed to their pool.
And historically, 2 seconds, Jan, we've benefited from drawing folks to Civic Center Park and to the Aquatic Center because they may spend money in Palm Desert at the mall or someplace else since they've driven over this way. Mayor Pro Tem Harnick.
Well, I think you covered it. Thank you.
And just one thing, it's not on here. It's actually in Public Works when we flip to that, and I'll say it's kind of an obscure thing, but I'll just share with you that the cities of Rancho Mirage and cities of Indian Wells have both now declined participation in the upkeep of what is called the Tri-Cities Ballpark, which is the Civic Center ballparks right behind us. They are now no longer contributing. I believe it was between $10,000 and $15,000 per city because their resident children were coming and playing ball here. They're no longer doing that. They have declined, and the agreement said, I believe, that they only had to give us notice within the 12 months preceding, and they've both given us notice. So the ballparks now are funded 100% by Palm Desert. Andy?
Thank you, Janet. So we've rolled up the entirety of the CIP presentation on this slide. And this is an aggregation of a lot of projects that you've heard before. Some are very obvious. Those are the San Pablo Phase 1, Phase 2 projects, Alessandra Alley, and the Monterey resurfacing. But as we look back at the successes that have happened within the Public Works Department, there are a number of other projects that have been completed in this last year. We've looked at traffic signal modifications at Highway 111 and Parkview Painter's Path, as well as El Paseo and San Luis Rey. We've also completed the annual slurry seal and striping program this year. Facility CIP projects, this includes the COVID-19 response, really setting ourselves up so that we can take appointment-based services and that we're ready to reopen. Facilities has played a substantial role in readying our facilities for the public and also making the facility more accommodating, safer for staff. A lot of touch-free faucets and toilets, just a lot of accommodations to adapt to our new environment. We've also worked with many affordable housing sites. We've done pool repairs, roof repairs, a lot of work in the last year at the housing properties. Staff have worked with the Desert Willow Golf Resort on carpet replacement within the clubhouse and as well as at the academy, and have replaced the Historic Society roof. Landscape projects, we have seen some fairly significant accomplishments in the last year. I would say that the Freedom Park skate park conversion and pickleball work is probably the one that's garnered the most attention, but the landscape team has done some other significant work too. As we look at the landscape maintenance areas, they manage over 300 acres of landscape areas through those contracts. So it's a fairly small staff team, but they leverage those resources and manage the contractors and the contracts to oversee and manage that additional work. Do want to call out the work that the street maintenance crews have also done. Earlier, I shared with you that with the exception of a very short period of time, we've been in continuous operation over the course of the pandemic. And the street maintenance crews are one of the groups that have shown up to work. They've gone out to the yard, gotten in their trucks each and every day. At the end of March, we had responded to over 760 service calls within the street maintenance yard. And that number is larger today. So a lot of work has been going on the last year, and we'll continue to do that over the course of this year. I also want to mention the work that we're doing right now. The slide says SB 1383 gap analysis. That's true. We're also looking at what we need to do in order to implement these laws within the city and what that means with our contract with a franchise agreement with Vertex. So staff in the Public Works Department are currently looking at that gap analysis, looking at what, ordinances need to be put into place and what we need to amend with our franchise agreement with Vertex to put that into place. So a lot more to come on that. Council will be seeing that here in the near future, but that has been a significant source of work in the last year. Major initiatives for the upcoming year. You've heard most of this already through the CIP presentation, so I won't repeat that. But earlier we discussed the $3.222 million in grants the city received for San Pablo Phase 2. We've also received grant monies for the upcoming year with HCIP grants that we're going to use to put into place some of the intersection improvements through the local road safety plan, the LRSP. That we've been conducting. So staff is continuing to look for cost containment measures by looking at non-general fund revenue sources for the work that goes on within the Public Works Department. And I'd also mention that over the last year or so, we've been working to consolidate some of our landscape maintenance areas, trying to make these a little bit larger, looking at economy of scale and trying to make these attractive to bidders so that we can realize some cost efficiencies through our landscape maintenance areas. And staff has shared that we've realized $150,000 in savings alone just in this 1 year, consolidating the landscape maintenance areas. So some real success looking at how we contract, how we bid out those maintenance areas and continue to provide service within the city.
Okay. These slides, there's quite a few of them. So unless someone has questions, I'll pause on each one. But this again is all of the budgets that are that the Public Works Department is responsible for. Includes our fleet, includes administration, our MPDES stormwater permit, and the administration of that program. Our actual parking lot maintenance, we have traffic and street safety and maintenance. Our parks are under, and our landscaping services are under the Public Works Department. And also under facilities, the Portola Community Center, and actually the maintenance of facilities that we handle, which is the building operations and maintenance. I will move on to economic development unless anyone has any questions on the Public Works slides.
Looks like we're good.
Martine?
Thanks, Janet. Good evening and good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. I am not going to use the pivot word, but I'm going to use the shift word. That's exactly what our Economic Development Department did over the last fiscal year. You'll see some bullet points here on the screen that really identify the underlying and sort of the umbrella campaign that was launched by the entire city. And this is where I'm going to reiterate where Andy indicated that all of our departments really took a major role in putting together Unite Palm Desert. And it really was a team effort to bring forward resources, information, economic relief to all of our residents, visitors, and specifically our businesses. And so over the last year, we were able to assist 286 businesses. That includes restaurants, service workers, and even just general retail establishments that were going through a tough time as the COVID-19 restrictions took place, and some businesses were faced with complete closure. That equated to about $2 million. We were also able to help our community partners with $100,000 in grants. And those again helped some of our nonprofit agencies that were struggling with keeping the doors open. We also launched the Hospitality Incentive Program. We currently have 4 hotels that are taking advantage of the buy two nights, get one free, the city participating in the one free night. And it's been really successful, especially as COVID-19 restrictions have lifted. And there will be some more opportunity as we come further into the shoulder seasons moving forward. We were also able to help about 24 restaurants with outdoor dining grants, equating to about $50,000 to $60,000 to allow them to establish outdoor dining areas and keep the doors open and services going for our visitors and residents. The other initiative that was launched and as a success was the Palm Desert Plates program. This was a program to assist our residents to provide meals, free meals that would help them in their time of need as well. We can say to date we have given and delivered a meal voucher worth $22 to every single affordable housing resident, including all those in the household. So those are out into the market. We have 10 participating restaurants that they can redeem those vouchers. We're also going to be working at a very similar approach with our first responders to provide vouchers. I think that that's probably something that we will make it a lot easier. Trying to coordinate, delivery of meals to those facilities has been a little bit challenging, given that they're always on the go, different shifts and things like that. So we're gonna shift to a different approach, and those also will be going out shortly. Our public affairs department has now been created. It really is a centralization of all communications, both internally and externally. And through the last year, we created several social media outlets and information platforms that assisted our residents and visitors get information not only on COVID-19 related matters, but on also other things that were happening throughout the city, how to communicate with the city in general. And that team is led by Thomas Soul and his department. And that's something that we're proud of being able to put together fairly quickly. On the marketing side, of course, we've had to slow down with the actual marketing as restrictions came into play. But we now can say that we're transitioning into a very aggressive drive market approach to attract visitors to our city. And I think Thomas indicated that here a little bit earlier. So we're looking forward to this last part of spring and into summer to really make a big move with the monies, the funds that we have saved over the last year to create an impact in our tourism sector. And again, visitor services, we went to online services, created a chat function, and we were able to communicate with our visitors for information that way. And then the last component was our special events. Of course, we had severe restrictions, but our division made significant efforts to move those events, whichever ones we could, to virtual or to some modified version that would be allowed as part of the restrictions. Notably, probably one of the most successful ones that was the graduation cruise night. Very proud of that. It's actually going to continue this year, along with some of the other cruise nights that will happen in the fall season. And then some initiatives, if we could, or if any questions there, I'll pause there.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Thank you. On the vouchers, on the Palm Desert, first of all, this is amazing how much was done. I mean, this is just incredible, all the things that happened, all the creativity and development that went into this. On the Palm Desert plates and the vouchers, I heard from a girlfriend who lives in our affordable housing, and she was a little unclear how to get it. Are there instructions that are on our website, or do I need to direct her somewhere to help her out?
Yeah, with a voucher, we delivered a brochure explaining, you know, where, actually, what restaurants they could go online and look at all the restaurants. We do have them on the website.
Okay, so I just need to tell her to read the manual. The next one is, you said we have 4 hotels participating in the hospitality incentive program. Why only 4? Is there?
We did communicate to all of our hoteliers, offered it. Those are the only ones that took advantage of the opportunity.
I was hoping that wasn't okay. I mean, I'm sure you reached out. I just was surprised that only 4. It's such a great opportunity for them and for everybody. Thank you.
Other questions? Looks like we're good. Thank you, Martine.
You're welcome. And then if we can touch upon briefly the major initiatives for next year. We were looking very much forward to launching the iHub and also providing a broadband fiber master plan that'll give us and inform us of what infrastructure we need to either plan for or install so that we have improved connectivity and access for all our residents and our businesses that we're trying to attract. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about relaunching of the Palm Desert Economic Incentive Program. There are monies that have been proposed as recommended for this next fiscal year. And we're looking to make some minor adjustments to that program, come back to you with some modified guidelines so that we can narrow down the focus of who we're trying to reach. Primarily, we're trying to set aside the funds to, you know, sort of focus our energies on our older building stock in terms of building remodels. But we also have the opportunity to look at a kind of a high-tech job, you know, creation fund that would allow us to basically market and attract some higher income jobs that are out there that would also be in conjunction with the iHub. So that's moving forward. We're in the process of interviewing a couple of real estate advisory consultants that'll help us take a fresh look at our University Park District, which is part of our northern part of Palm Desert, including the university area, the areas near the freeway, and some of our land uses that maybe need to be reimagined and need to be refocused so that we can set us up for success when we're trying to attract those new sort of new businesses to diversify our economy. And we're part of Thomas's team is going to look at the city's website to revamp it and look at, you know, opportunities to make it more user-friendly and to provide ease of access for information. And of course, another initiative would be to encourage and increase our engagement with our residents and stakeholders. And then again, to really focus on expanding, improving, and broadening our communications, both internal and external, from one sort of centralized division. And of course, we're going to be marketing that drive market as we move forward in the coming year. And the last bullet there, we just, of course, we had to reduce our spending on special events based on restrictions, based on travel restrictions and visitor marketing. So there were some cost containments that were there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
No hands.
Okay. We are going to, this is kind of the summation of the departments that are under Martine. The one thing I'll just point out on this slide is not to panic. It's not that we don't have staff or got rid of staff in our visitor services. We just kind of, let's see, Martine's shifting everything. So we shifted our staff to marketing only because that seems to be where most of our staff is working right now. So we did move them to marketing. So this is the summation. What I am going to ask is if I can go ahead and request that we move to Desert Willow before we go to events, if that's acceptable with the mayor.
Sure.
I'd like to do that, and that way, if you have questions for Derek, we make sure we get all of those in. So with that, Derek, have you been elevated to a
Yes.
panelist? Okay. I am going to quickly go down. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because Derek is going to share his screen with his information. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, now I get to see everybody. Hi, Derek.
Hi there. Let's see if I can get this. Does everybody see the slideshow version of this presentation at this point?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into it. We'll keep it somewhat high level, and I will happily dive into any details everyone would like to. So let's kind of talk about where we're at and where we were. In here, you're going to kind of see, and can everybody see my cursor as well as the pointer? Perfect.
Yes.
So let's take you back to 2018, 2019 pre-pandemic. This 11.6 was a record revenue level for Desert Willow Golf Resort. In fact, we made the leap from approximately 10.5 to 11.6 in a single year. We did see some significant improvement there. Obviously, then fast forward, we had a pandemic. We had a complete shutdown as of March 20th, laid off a number of staffers. The ultimate loss of operations is down here at this 866,000. You know, when the rug's pulled out from under you in March in our season and in the month of April, that's a pretty tough one to come back from. We did make all the adjustments we felt we possibly could at the time to save on expenses, not knowing what the future was going to hold. As we roll into what's projected, I'd say, again, as Janet mentioned, this news, any news that's 24 hours old is old news. We did produce this projection back in March as contractually obligated. So I would say that things have actually improved since this particular projection. So one thing I might note is that I do think that this $138,000 of cash shortage at the bottom, which I can walk through as well, will actually close that gap by the time we get to June 30. I actually believe that the 2021 fiscal year, we will be operationally break even at worst. So that's good news. But let's talk about what kind of happened in the market. Who knew that a global pandemic was going to lead to a golf revival? The NGF, I mean, this is the record growth we've seen since the Tiger Woods era. National Golf Foundation showed that over 500,000 golfers, either new or returning golfers, were added in the 2020 calendar year. Rounds played, despite almost 100% of golf courses being closed for the entire month of April, showed an increase in rounds played of almost 14% across the nation. And we saw a great deal of that improvement as well. Once we got to, say, July, and we knew that we were okay to be open, although with the restrictions that were required, we saw a record growth. I think the month of July, we saw a 30% increase. In the month of August, we saw a 50% year-over-year increase. And that continued until, of course, December, when there was the full California kind of shutdown again, and that impacted hotels and our ability to garner those types of guests. The food and beverage industry, although was a little bit different, and that one suffered significantly, especially this particular fiscal year, in terms of banquet events. And while the term pivot and shift has been used in today's meeting, I might akin it more to the hokey pokey, where it's the bring your guests in, send your guests home, bring your guests in, send your guests home sort of a scenario, and or put them outside, bring them inside, send them outside, you know, send them with to-go food. And so there was a lot of changes, banquet events and weddings, those types of things, which are popular profit generators for Desert Willow, were completely shut off for this fiscal year thus far, with really just recent guidance from the state on how those could be moved forward. So That has been difficult, but golf has boomed. And so that is good news. So I think that when we look at the budget and you see that, now we're projecting to go from, say, maybe this is 9.8 or 10 million, we're going to go, we see a complete V-shaped recovery coming. We will be right back to where we were at those record levels in 2018, 2019. And I think that that's a fairly conservative estimate. There are some question marks. For instance, this April was a record April of all time. And we don't necessarily know if that's ever going to happen again because there were no concert events. So every hotel was filled with prospective golfers. And then, in previous years, we saw massive declines in the golf business because the concerts, which do benefit the Valley, MTO2 taxes, totally get that. But they do not allow for golf group outings to have a reasonable hotel price and things like that. So, this great April we might never see again, but we do anticipate the Aprils being good. So at the point in which we projected this budget, we fully anticipated full V-shaped recovery. That to get us back to this $11.7 million. Our pace report for events in the fall is unbelievable. It will be wedding central at Desert Willow. So beware if you're coming on a Friday or Saturday that it's likely the clubhouse will be closed for a wedding this fall, as long as restrictions are, for the most part, removed. And so that is part of the budget assumptions, is that we would see somewhat of more of normalcy by July 1st and certainly by October 1st, which would be more critical for those events to move forward in the fall. I think from a programming standpoint, we do anticipate kind of running the programs that have led to our success over the last 4 or 5 years by really pushing our loyalty program, which we consider a best-in-class program, especially in this valley and in the nationwide. It's been an example for many other Kemper sports properties. So we'll continue to do that. We will revive our special event programming so that we can utilize the facility for those that, as Ms. Kelly would maybe indicate, they're not necessarily current golfers, they will be future golfers. But anyway, for those folks that don't participate in golf currently, we do like to have large music events and things like that, which community members can come out and use the facility for. We certainly expect, social luncheons and things like that to return for various entities that used to do that here. Let's move on to expenses, unless anybody has any questions per se about revenues. All right, from the expenses standpoint, we're still dealing with and trying to survive the minimum wage increases over the past, 4 to 5 years. And so this upcoming, January of 2022, minimum wage will go from $14 to $15. I think we've expressed this to some council members in the past, but, especially in the beginning, we went through some significant wage compression. And from that, I mean, taking the skilled labor wages and not maybe raising them as much as the, base lower minimum wage earners were getting. At some point along that line, we had to start bumping that full dollar to all of those people just to maintain some sort of gap between skill earners and the base level, entry level positions. That does lead to a pretty significant increase. And if I were to show you, what the 5-year increase in labor was, it was pretty significant. And it does look like a really large number when it goes from 5.2 million in 2019 to 6 million in 2022. But you have to understand that there's 3 years worth of minimum wage increases, and we'll likely be getting ourselves back to the same sort of full-time equivalent levels that we were in the past to handle the volume of business that comes with a V-shaped recovery. So that's the labor side of things. From the operating expenses, we plan on, for the most part, things kind of just keeping up with inflation. Some things are impacted significantly, like the prices of gas, and those impact our prices for, say, things like tree trimming or even seed. Those things might rise faster than inflation, but there's other things that aren't going to be impacted by inflation much at all. And so we do anticipate kind of limited inflationary type increases to operating expenses. And so really what that generates in that V-shaped recovery is a position in which we would generate cash from operations of at least $75,000 to help cover, the small equipment sort of replacement things that we replace from our Desert Willow operations fund. I think every year we try and spend of those CIP type dollars around $100,000 worth of small equipment that is really operations based that we find, certainly the operation should be replacing. I'd say also within that cash flow number is $100,000 of rent that goes back to the city. So let's, I don't want to lose sight of that, but PDRC does pay rent back to the city. So that actually would come out somewhere within there before that $75,000. So there is some additional dollars generated that maybe you wouldn't see here. Any particular questions about upcoming FY 21-22? Any thoughts? Yes.
Unmute myself here. I have a quick question is in trying to understand all of the projections for guests that would be coming in and out. So right off the top, would you happen to know what that looks like? How many people on average come year after year? And the reason I'm asking is because I'm under the impression that, and this is from what residents have reached out to me, that the Desert Willow Golf Course is only for California residents. So I would, if that's not the case, this is a great place to clarify so that more people can go and attend and take part, and maybe that can boost attendance by addressing misconceptions.
Yes, so it is absolutely worldwide and world renowned. Our facility is, one of the top and award-winning facilities in the nation. And we see visitors from all over the world. So it's definitely not for California residents only. We do have that special Palm Desert resident program that exists, but there is no, California resident program. So it's general public, and then it's Palm Desert resident. There is nothing in between at this point.
And for those residents, about how much of the time are they allocated? So again, we know who to encourage to keep going. How much of the time that you have allotted is for Palm Desert residents?
Well, we don't allocate specific times for Palm Desert residents, right? They have a 3-day booking window, and they're afforded a great rate to kind of be that 3-day booking window. And so they end up booking tee times within that time frame. So it's
sorry if I could interject my question. I was thinking in Spanish, and so I asked my question incorrectly. What I meant to say is what portion of your revenue comes from those, not how it's allocated or dedicated, the other way around. How much of that is coming from the local residents?
Yeah, so and it varies year to year because again, with that 3-day booking window comes, if the demand in the market is huge, then there might be less availability at the times that the residents want to play. If demand in the market is slower, then there might be more availability for residents to play. If we looked at, last year, just to give some highlight perspective, or let's look at 2019, since it was more of a realistic number. And it's impossible for me to quantify, how much food and beverage revenue specifically comes from residents necessarily. I would say a vast majority, or not a vast majority, but a large amount does. From a golf standpoint, they make up approximately in the year ending 2019, they were approximately 12% of the rounds and 8% of the golf green fee revenue.
And Derek, could I quickly clarify, do those numbers include residents who bought the loyalty card, which would enable them a little bit more latitude for tee times?
It does not. That only includes the residents playing specifically under the Palm Desert resident program.
And each year, currently, about how many residents buy the loyalty card?
So we typically sell out the loyalty program at about 1,000. In the past, it's been 50-50. I think this year was more like 40-60. So, but we still have a large percent of residents who are purchasing that platinum loyalty card. And again, most of the time they're purchasing that so that they can have their guests come play at those reduced rates.
So all of those players would be in addition to the percentage that you mentioned.
Relatively, right? Because their guests wouldn't necessarily be Palm Desert residents. They might be family from other locations. So I can't say that 40% of platinum card rounds are related to residents. Is that fair?
Sure. Mayor Pro Tem Harnick and then Councilmember Nestande.
Thank you. So what I was going to ask when you said the loyalty program, Derek, I was going to ask, that's the same as the platinum program?
Yes, for in season.
Okay, so during the summer, which I know you have a great program during the summer, what is the name of that program?
That's the summer VIP card. There's also a summer elite pass, and that's a little bit different. That's a pay up front and then play for free. The summer VIP card is more of a, you pay for the card to get discounted access.
Okay.
Last year, we gave that summer VIP card complimentary to anybody who held a resident card. And we did the same or are going to be doing the same again this year.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Nestande next, and then Councilmember Jonathan.
I would just, and this is maybe more directed towards Councilmember Quintanilla. Since I've been on council since December 2016, the whole topic of resident rates, resident access to Desert Willow has been an ongoing discussion. And perhaps we could get you that background information and see the votes we've taken. And part of the debate has been on how to define who is a Palm Desert resident, because you might have a second home in Palm Desert, but still not be considered a resident to get that resident rate. And a lot of the residents wanted to be able to book 14 days out, and that hasn't been economically feasible to give the resident rate to book farther out than the 3 days. And Canadians in particular really can't get, well, they can't come over right now because the border's closed, but if they could come here.
Can I potentially interrupt? I do apologize. In order to respect everyone's time, I thought I heard there was a question, but this seems like a statement, and perhaps this could be resolved in an email so we can respect everyone's time. If it's not pertinent to the conversation, I do apologize.
Thank you. I think Gina was just offering further information another time, so offer her. Councilmember Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate it. Listen, knowledge and understanding is always a good thing. So along those lines, Derek, as you know, Desert Willow serves a dual purpose. One, as an economic driver and an incentive for developers to create hotels and other sources of TOT in Desert Willow. And that was the original purpose, or one of them. The other competing goal is to create recreational golf for our residents at some level of discount. You and I have been involved in a task force that reviewed those dual goals and made major modifications to our program, converted to dynamic prices, created new membership tiers, and so on and so forth to accommodate the needs and desires of our residents. Here's the question. In your opinion, at this point, are we striking a fair balance between those two goals, accommodating our residents' desire for reasonably discounted golf, and at the same time achieving the goals of having an economic driver at Desert Willow?
Yeah, I guess I kind of point the question back to council a little bit, and this is to be absolutely respectful, but it's more a matter of, what do you want operations financially to look like? You know, do you want it to be break even to cover its capital costs, which has always been the case, in which case I'd say currently we have survived the minimum wage increase. We are able to put money on the bottom line to cover a lot of those costs, to cover the leases for the equipment used. And no, we're not suffering in the least bit the quality of the product that we are offering our guests. The question would remain is, if there is a downturn, if there's a recession, and we're unable to generate some of those revenues and more are forced to maybe look at local markets as more of the support system for, say, revenue generation, then we might not have a balance. And yeah, that might be a little bit of a political statement on my behalf, but I think that it's one of those things that, yes, right now there seems to be a great balance. We're able to generate the revenues necessary. And, you know, it's something that could be looked at down the road, depending on where markets and demands and pricing and all that kind of stuff goes.
And I appreciate that answer. That's very good. And just if you can clarify one final question. This is an operational budget and statement. I know by being the liaison to the Desert Willow Committee for, I don't know, a couple of years, 3 different years, that in addition to operational expenses, we also face some very significant long-term maintenance and replacement costs So am I correct that those are not reflected in this operational statement that's before us?
They are not, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Quintaniak.
I would love to ask the follow-up question that Councilmember Jonathan brought up, and a great point. I have seen a lot of different agenda items that come in order to help fund those. I was wondering if there is an estimate of the forthcoming projects that are on the horizon, so that there's a great way to know what to budget for and what's ahead. And I do see a note that the full-length executive summary is available, and I don't know if that's something I can request from staff or request from you, but I definitely look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So the full-length executive summary will actually probably cover the majority of operations and in much more detail. That's what that particular document covers. You will see a slide here coming up that kind of covers CIP. It was one of the line items that the city showed previously as fully funded, right? There was a Desert Willow Golf portion, and all of those projects, among those, of course, was Desert Willow, and they mentioned that those were funded. We can talk about funding sources for it. If you don't mind, I'll just look at the outgoing 5-year look forward. It'll also encompass some discussion of CIP, if that's all right. I will answer your question, and there is a slide to kind of talk to what's immediate in the upcoming year, and I can also speak to what's coming in future years.
Let's move on and see how much we cover.
Excellent. So this is kind of a high-level assumption for future operational projections. One of the items, which is a large capital improvement project and has been talked about, I believe, in your study session that I watched by Andy, and there will be some seed money in the upcoming CIP budget to plan for a fire cliff renovation. I did send over a recommendation memo that also dovetails on the plan that was produced by our architect, Dr. Hertzen, back in 2014. Portions of that master plan we have already completed, such as fire cliff bunker renovation. The next portion of that renovation includes resurfacing the greens, as well as releveling and resurfacing the tee boxes, two of the components of which, of course, every golfer touches every time they play. We've also had the USGA has been out, and they have done some analysis, and every year we have them come out and review our agronomy practices and the soil conditions and all of those types of things, just as an independent review. They have also recommended similar projects. So we have, in a 5-year plan, recommended that potentially would move forward. Obviously, council will make those decisions, and we'll talk about how they will impact the city financially. I would say that right now we have that full-length project to estimated to cost about $1.7 million, with the portion that will, let me just flip to this. The portion that's really imminent will be this $175,000. This is the capital improvement plan. And that is really to get a consultant on board, whether it's the original architect or some other architecture firm, to put together the scope of work necessary to bid this out. We've done some projects in the past, and we've noted that the less specific we are on the scope, the larger the contingency amount needs to be, since it's kind of in-field work. In this particular case, we're wanting to have more detailed work on the front end, which will hopefully produce less contingency needs on the back end. The planning for this particular large project, which is the most notable in the 5-year plan, would be to take place within the fiscal years 2023 and 2024. I think there's some good reasons. It does take some time for this architect to both develop the scope to move this project forward, as well as to get a qualified contractor on board in enough lead time that they can be fully mobilized by that summer of 2023. I also thought that it would behoove us to take advantage of current demand levels, especially in this upcoming calendar year, to kind of maximize as much revenue and profit as we can to help offset some of the business losses that are going to be associated with doing a renovation. If I bounce back to this estimated outgoing years, I did note in here that the decline in the revenues in FY 2023 and 2024 are projected because of the closure of Fire Cliff that would be needed. And it's likely that it would be needed from May 15th all the way to September 30th, knowing that a closure in season would lead to drastically more loss in revenue. Obviously, we would plan a project like this in the summer. It's it's going to impact each fiscal year approximately 300K in revenue loss. That month and a half of fiscal year 2023 is approximately 300K, and the July, August, September loss is roughly the same. And so when you see that we are going to lose revenues, I do have a projection, because we are going to be impacted by minimum wage for at least one more outgoing year, that we may, because of that closure, have loss from operations in those 2 particular years. If demand continues and we're able to continue pushing rates faster, maybe we're able to lessen that. But it's just, I think, one of those things that with a closure, we just have opportunity cost. So there will be some there. In terms
Derek,
of
Derek, I'm sorry.
Has a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Janet, did you want to go in there before I ask my question?
I was not going to go before you. I just have a comment question kind of after you.
My questions, I have 2 quick questions. So number one, and we can maybe discuss this at Desert Willow Committee, but I just wonder if closing Firecliff can be done 9 holes at a time, since there is some level of demand by some sector of golf players to play just 9 holes. So maybe you've already crossed that bridge and it's a non-starter, but do you have a quick answer to that?
Most of our play in the summertime happens in the morning. They're wanting to play that 18 holes. We're able to absorb a little bit of those losses onto the Mountain View course. I think I would recommend, doing the full 18. Whether or not they can stage it, that's going to be a discussion with the contractor. Hey, the problem is growing, right? Like once we put the sod down or we sprig the greens, there's a significant amount of this construction time that's just flat out letting grass grow.
Okay.
I would highly recommend doing all 18 at once. This isn't really a facility that's driven a lot by 9-hole rounds. If we were a city course in Northern California with 3 million people around us, I'd say, yeah, we could probably be better off to do that. We're a destination location. Everybody wants Firecliff to be its pristine version. And so I think it'd behoove us to do it all at once.
Got it. So I'm grateful for your expertise, as always. Quickly, can you go back to the previous slide where you showed the
CIP?
The long-term deficit that I think is subsidized by the operational profit? No, you showed it to us just before this one, I thought.
This was the 5-year.
Okay.
And this will be kind of the subsidized piece, right?
I think it was the one just before that. I guess let me ask it conceptual if you can bring it up there. I think you showed, I'm not sure. You showed a slide where you indicated what the capital expenditures were projected to be, and that they were offset in part by positive revenue. And then the net amount that is coming out of the capital improvement fund versus the Desert Willow fund.
Yeah, I don't think that I've shared that here. We definitely have that information available. I think that what was shown to you all from a Desert Willow perspective.
All right, let's just, so it's this one. Let's just stick with that, right?
Okay.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this one correct. I think what the Desert Willow projects for fiscal year 21-22, you're saying are, let's call it $2 million, and they would be funded $729,000 out of the Desert Willow fund, $1,259,000 from Capital Golf Fund. So I want to make sure I understand. I know that unlike similar clubs like Indian Wells that bleeds about $600,000 a year, we generally create positive cash flow. Is that the Desert Willow fund? And and if we didn't have that, would we be transferring $2 million instead of $1.2 million from the Capital Golf Fund? Am I understanding that correctly?
I think generally, yes. What I will say about that $729,000 is those aren't all excess profits. If I was to walk back up and show you cash from operations, one of the things you'll see in here are these leases. So you got like $500,000 of this 700 are part of the principal payments that I've noted in previous slides that are here before cash flow. So yes, we're paying for those leases as a part of operations, but I don't want people to think that we're generating $700,000 excess money that's available for capital projects. The majority of that 700,000 is going towards our capital lease payments for things like golf carts and maintenance equipment, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I was just going to say, Derek, for the good of the order here and for the good of the group, these projects are developed in cooperation with your team. However, a lot of these are looked at. We did a reserve study several years back. The city conducted that to determine the types of things that we would need on a look forward basis with respect to maintaining a golf course. So while these are not exactly what was included in the study, we task you with looking at those things that are requested in that study annually to see what really needs to be done. Because in some cases, it's much more than this that's recommended. But as we're looking through it, we make sure that it is something that has to be done. But this is a list that is at least started in part from that study that we have that the city conducted. And that when these projects are undertaken, that this will be in cooperation with city staff, and city staff will assist in that process, as most of them are projects that require bidding under our guidelines, and also through some of them may be prevailing wage, and some of them may be like I said, actually public projects. It becomes a public work, even though it's on a golf course. So I just wanted to clarify that, because sometimes when I'm looking at these amounts, that may seem like they're a little high. Or how did we come up with this list? It is started by that study that we did do.
Correct. I'd also highlight too, things like perimeter landscaping that the city handles. That's here for 220,000. That's not necessarily specific to what Camper Sports is managing. Desert Willow Perimeter Landscape Rehabilitation Phase 2 for 550,000. That's a project that the city is working on, independent of the management over here at the clubhouse related or operations type things related. So there's a lot of things in here. While it's all related to Desert Willow, it's not necessarily Desert Willow specific.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Derek or for city staff on these projects or Desert Willow? If not, thank you very much, Derek. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And
thank you.
Derek will stop sharing so that it's my turn again.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'm just gonna see if I can go backwards for a second. Now,
You had mastered going backwards at the beginning.
I did, and now I seem to have lost my touch. Okay, if they have not been elevated, I would like to ask Martine, Thomas, and Vanessa if they could be elevated as participants. And I'll share that this is a summary slide of city-produced events between 2021 and 21-22, special events, and city-sponsored events. And Vanessa can explain better what each one of those are, because there is differentiation between some of those. Some of them are ones the city puts on, some of them are ones that we participate in, and some of them are just ones that we sponsor. But I am going to stop here, and I'm going to see if I'm going to look through my folks to see if they are elevated. They are there. So I am going to show you what the screen will look like, and then I'm going to ask Vanessa actually to share her screen, because I think that you'll be able to see hers better than mine.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. Let me bring up. So this is the budget that is before you. On top, we have our city produced events. So these are events that we as staff put on. We do participate obviously in the golf cart parade, so we do a float, our Independence Day celebration, spring fall concerts, Veterans Day ceremony. We have added in there a San Pablo opening event, since unfortunately we had to postpone that due to the pandemic, and so we know that council would like to have an opening event for that. Miscellaneous events, this includes some of our licensing costs. Anytime we have a concert, we do have to pay the licensing fees for that. And then also there are sometimes some costs that come up with regards to additional signage, which we anticipate signage that would need to remind folks to wear masks, especially at our Independence Day celebration. So that is what that funding is for. In the middle here, we have staff overtime for special events. A majority of this is actually for the 4th of July because we do have so much staff that is working. This is public works, development services, economic development. It's a team effort to put that event on. And so we do have staff come in for that day. And so that is the cost for them. I'm trying to make sure. Seeing both screens is a little weird for me, so I'm sorry. I hope I'm going into the right section. Down below, you'll see city-sponsored events. These are events that these city sponsors. They are put on by third-party organizers, and then we just assist them with putting the events on here in the city of Palm Desert. And then I'm here to answer any questions that you might have on any of the recommendations that are on this budget.
Yes, let's Councilmember King to the end, then Mayor Pro Tem Arnick.
My quick question, I'd already initiated the question to clarify an email, but I don't think we got the update by the time we got here. In regards to the very first line item there, the 29 Palms Marine Corps Band, I was wondering how often does the Marine Corps Band participate in our events? And I think there was something about it also could potentially be community bands. So what are the guidelines for that and how many events will that actually encompass?
Okay. And thank you for that question. The 7th Regiment 29 Palms Marine Corps program, that sponsorship is not necessarily for them to participate as far as a band in the programming. My understanding is we adopted the 7th Regiment 29 Palms Marine Corps. And so this is funding that the city has set aside in the past to assist with events at the Marine Corps for the families there. There are some times where there are events that they would like to have held in Palm Desert. And so this would cover like the cost for buses to bring them on in. That program is actually handled through Jennifer. She is our liaison to the 7th Regiment Corps, but it is included in this budget because we wanted to maintain all sponsorships in one.
Thank you. That clarifies. Somehow I was under the impression that had to do with music, and I thought that's interesting. How does that come about? So thank you for clarifying. I'd gotten everything jumbled. My appreciation.
Mayor Pro Tem Arnick.
Thank you. Well, this is a tough one for me because you might remember my position on the golf cart parade a few years ago. And I think we need to kind of leave ourselves open to what that might look like in this coming year, because they have struggled to some extent. They're coming around, and I am not suggesting an amount. I'm just suggesting that we remain open to the fact that there might be a different level of sponsorship. And I know everyone probably remembers what we went through before, and I took a pretty strong position on it. I think we might have to keep our mind open, make sure that we help out if needed and in certain ways. And those are my thoughts on that.
My other question that I had was in regards to the Sunday market. Last I heard, that was just a proposed idea. Now it looks like there will be a much larger ask for that Sunday market. So I was wondering, what are the guidelines for that? Will that be strictly through the, will it exclude the summer, or what is the vision for that?
Councilmember Quintanilla, the Sunday market here on this budget was just, it's kind of a placeholder because we're waiting for direction, of course, from you as a council to see if you would like to continue that. But we wanted to make sure that if this was something that council wanted to proceed with, that those funds were accounted for and available. So we will still be looking for direction on any of these events if they are approved by you and if they will move forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. So I am refraining from any discussion about the individual items presented here because I'm assuming that we're going to get into the weeds at a later time. Is that correct? Or is this the time to chime in on specific events?
This is the time for the council to give staff direction, or not direction, but to have the discussion so that we can bring something back to you for approval or acceptance or revisions.
Well, I mean, I think if we start having detailed discussion about which events are worthy, which aren't, the amount of funding and so forth, that could consume the rest of our time today and probably all of the next session. So I guess I just want to make, I prefer not to get into the weeds on that today, but I want to make sure that we all have an opportunity at some later time. So can we facilitate that somehow?
Mayor Pro Tem Arnick, did you have a suggestion or a different comment?
No, I was just raising my hand because I was agreeing with Sabi.
We've just heard Vanessa confirm that at least one item is a placeholder with an expectation of further decision-making by the council. Maybe we should flag at this point for the benefit of staff those items which we feel warrant further discussion, which hopefully won't be all of them.
Just to clarify, Mayor, are you asking us to take a moment to prioritize or think about it, or what's the direction for this?
Well, I'm really asking you, Sunday Farmers Market jumped out at you. And I'm asking our colleagues, what else jumps out at you as something you'd like more information about before you say that's the right number? Councilmember Jonathan.
Thank you. So, I mean, this is the study session, so I think the normal terminology is give staff guidance. So, you know, I don't think we want to make any kind of decisions, but I mean, just going down the list, I can tell you I have questions about the San Pablo opening event. I'm not sure what staff has in mind. I don't know if that's going to incorporate CV Link. So, I would welcome some information on that. I'm not ready to say yay, nay, or whatever. I just would like more information on that. Certainly some of the stalwarts of what we support, the 7th Regiment, Senior Inspiration Awards, Fashion Week, et cetera, I don't feel that I personally need more comments or more detail. I think the Sunday market, the Wednesday market, we had a test run and that's worthy. I know that there are perhaps differing opinions, perhaps evolving opinions. So that might be worthy of further discussion amongst council. There's quite a number that are on there. The golf cart parade, Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. We can certainly have discussion about that. I'm kind of sensing, the entire council was at the chamber breakfast this morning. We met the new CEO. There's a new energy. I'm sensing that we need to kind of take a leap of faith, do what we can to help the chamber recover and gain its former glory and maybe even go beyond that. So I don't know how that translates into the golf cart parade, but if there's going to be discussion, I think that's part of it. Opening day, which is baseball, softball. It's not a large amount, but I think that event has morphed, evolved, changed, suffered at times. So we may want to visit that. And then I'm not sure why the half marathon is not being considered. I thought that I don't know if that's the women's half marathon or another event, but I thought that puts heads in beds. The data that we saw indicated that it did, unless I'm thinking, oh, I see women's half marathon separately. So maybe we can get some information on the Palm Desert half marathon. I don't know the status of the Patriot Ride. Again, it's been one point they wanted to be in Palm Desert, but then turned out they really didn't. So I'm not necessarily in disagreement, but maybe an update is, are they asking us still, or is that just on there because it was on there in the past? So, you know, and the ice rink, I'm not sure what that is. So, but I'm okay with it, whatever. So those are just, if you ask Mayor which ones might be worthy of further discussion, those are some of the ones on my mind.
Thank you. With regard to at least some of these, I think staff has created the presumption, the expectation that there will be further council input about the nature of the event. For example, Independence Day, when we decided to order the fireworks, it was agreed that we'd take stock of COVID metrics and guidance before the event was actually finalized. And would it be correct to expect that when it comes to planning the San Pablo event, that you'd return to council for input about the shape of the event?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Todd, staff, what would you consider to be the most efficient way of proceeding to try to get to a place where we have a budget?
I think we can certainly come back to you with the, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 7 of these events that have been flagged, and I think we could either put together a quick description of how they're funded, what the budget would entail, if it's and come back to you with either in a study session, or we could schedule a follow-up budget meeting, kind of a wrap-up budget meeting in June. So it's your call how you'd like that handled.
Maybe you could distribute additional information, and
Okay.
we could touch base on the 26th to see if that is satisfactory for council members. Councilmember Jonathan?
Just in terms of direction of staff on what's presented, you know, back to the San Pablo opening, I just don't want to use up all our funds for San Pablo and CV Link on San Pablo, because to me, you know, the opening of CV Link maybe is not as momentous, but it's certainly a very important event in the city and the city's history. So I just want to make sure we have, if the rest of the council wants to go in that direction, I want to make sure there's something's available somewhere to fund an opening event for CV Link if it's not going to be part of a joint opening event.
And I'm going to just kind of step in a little bit here. And Vanessa, I know that you have a miscellaneous sponsorship line, 25,000 right in the middle of this page. And I can understand that council wanting additional information, wanting more detail on these events. What I'd like to kind of get an idea from the council is this bottom line, this 486.5, in line with what you would be thinking for events? Because I think what we can do is we can bring back maybe more information on the schedule and the types of things that we can get from this number. Or if you want to give us a flat number to work with, we would like to try to, you know, incorporate that into the general. This does come from general fund, so into the general fund budget, so that we can present that to you and get something out to the public. Once we notice the public hearing, we have the May meeting that we can talk about this again. But once we publish that notice in the paper, we would like to get as close to the bottom line as far as what the general fund budget would be. So I throw that out to the council.
Thank you, Janet. That's helpful. That $25,000 miscellaneous line does give us some flexibility. At the same time, that is the budget line from which we will be funding all requests to purchase tickets or tables for nonprofit fundraisers. And those nonprofit fundraisers are probably going to really multiply as we're free of pandemic concerns. So it gives us some flexibility, but we probably wouldn't want to rate it too deeply to supplement other things. Can we get some feedback from council in response to Janet's question as to whether this bottom line figure strikes us as sufficient to cover events so that she knows what to build into the budget as we refine specific events? Speak up. Yes, Gina.
It looks sufficient to me. Of course, always having a little more money would be nice, but it looked sufficient to me. And my memory is fading, but I thought we had a meeting right before the pandemic where we actually had the people putting on the various events make the case of why they needed X amount of dollars. And I recall that being very informative. So a lot of these events we did hear from the event organizers, and the only one, and Mayor Pro Tem brought it up, was the golf cart parade. Back then, I think they were wanting $50,000, and we said, no, that was too much, but I can't remember exactly. So that's the only area where I see we might not stick to our budget if we decide to spend upwards of X amount of dollars.
Anyone else have feedback? Yes, Councilmember Quintanilla. And did you have your hand up after that, Councilmember Jonathan? Yes, okay.
I would just love to say I concur with Councilmember Nestande. More would of course be wonderful, but just knowing how much flexibility there is and that some of this doesn't have to be as committed and where we can get some wiggle room is absolutely what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur, and I would add to it. I mean, I don't think there's much more that creates community identity and cohesiveness, and at this special time, recovery from a horrible chapter in our history than these special events. The 486.5 being proposed is less than 1% of our budget. I'd almost, frankly, be inclined to up that a little bit to 550, or the slush fund, the miscellaneous, to 75, because I can see where there's a possibility of new events. We've talked about bringing the art festival to Palm Desert, and some other opportunities that may exist. And I don't want our city to be hamstrung and not be able to seize upon a good opportunity. So, I wouldn't be opposed. If we make that 75, it doesn't mean that we have to spend it, but it's there if we choose to. So I'd be okay with that.
Any other input? Todd, you are unmuted. Is that because you wanted to offer some thoughts?
We can certainly build a little bit of flexibility and increase the miscellaneous a little bit. I just asked Councilmember Jonathan to avoid the slush fund. It's something Janet and I've been lecturing the staff on all along. Please don't say that word. But and yeah, wherever you want to set it, if you'd like to set miscellaneous a little higher to give yourself some room, that's fine. And he's absolutely correct. If we don't spend it, it just falls back into the general fund reserves anyway. So if you want to give yourself a little bit of flexibility, that's fine. Jan just wants to know what to put in the budget number. So we'll make anything happen you like.
Todd, I just want to say that slush fund is a technical CPA term, but if you prefer, we can call it, contingency fund or something like that, whatever.
Yeah, thank you. I prefer those types of other words.
I can't believe you used that.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have something of substance to say? I'm going to offer this, and it surprises me because I ordinarily appreciate, Janet will confirm I'm always asking questions about the miscellaneous sponsorship line because I want to make sure we're equipped to support worthwhile things. That the thought being that much of what makes our community special is volunteer time of those who are so active in our nonprofit. So it's an appropriate city function to affirm and support them. At the same time, if that number is too big, it's hard to say no when no is the right answer. So I'm thinking 50 might be about right instead of 75. But this is not a decision-making meeting. We're all just giving our feedback. So I suppose let's see what staff does with all of that.
Mayor,
Okay.
can I clarify? Did you
Yeah.
mean 550,000 in the? Did I misunderstand you?
I meant moving miscellaneous sponsorships from 25 to 50.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Instead of 275, but
So what I have is based on the discussion, is staff will bring something back at the next meeting as a follow-up. We can see how, and we'll really be talking more about probably money than we will about specific specific events at that point. And that'll give us a placeholder if we're not able to get with the council with respect to the going into the detail for the actual events, or if we have time next time and there's, we have time on the time set aside that we've set aside on that date, we can go into them a little bit more after we've done public safety. But if not, then we will see if we can't find a time, but we will present an amount to you. And keep in mind that although Vanessa's done an excellent job actually detailing some of the things that she anticipated coming forward, that we really don't know what exactly is going to come up during the year. And this number in the budget is strictly a number. She gives us an idea of what types of things will be funded, but that is just a number. So the council still has flexibility. So with that, is there any other discussion about events today? I know we are 5 minutes over our allotted time. I just have a couple things that I'd like to go through, but I'm happy to do that at the beginning of the next meeting if everyone is under time constraint.
What's the will of the people?
Can you do it in 5 minutes?
I'll do my best.
I'm good with that.
Everyone else okay?
I'm in favor of Janet taking the time that she needs so that we can get as much of this done as possible.
Okay, then I am going to share my screen again. I know how much you all enjoy when I do that. Okay, so it takes a minute for my system to catch up to knowing it's there. You can all see it, correct? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. So as I mentioned early on in the discussion, there's that terminology, new revenue sources. I'll stick with that one as opposed to Councilmember Jonathan's suggestion that it might raise taxes. And what I'll say is there are several different things that the city could do in order to get new revenue. And we really are just throwing these out there because we want you to know what other cities have done. Many cities in the valley do have a sales tax. Palm Desert does not. There are, I believe, 3 areas or 3 cities and the county other than Palm Desert that do not have an increased sales tax or district tax. So that is one thing. To give you an idea what that sounds like, 1/4% would net the city about $4.5 million, but most cities are up in the 1% range. So a 1% almost doubles what we receive in sales tax. Of course, you know, that is a ballot measure. It is a tax. So there's a lot of things you have to go through in order to do that. But I just share that with you for some perspective. The next thing would be what we.
Hey, Janet, just very briefly on that. Does it basically come down to a 50% majority vote of the residents?
You know, I need to go back and look because they changed that just a
Okay.
couple years ago. I think it's a 2/3 vote.
And I thought the change was to a simple majority, but we can circle back to that. Thanks.
Okay. I believe that when we did the TOT, I think I need to go back and look again, but thank you for making me remember to ask that too. Okay. They did change it, and I don't know if they changed it back. The other thing again would be to raise the TOT rate. We are at 11%. 1% raise of the TOT would net us about 1 million. So that kind of gives you some perspective with respect to the sales tax versus TOT. And the last thing would be a utility users tax. Cathedral City has a utility users tax. We kind of looked at what they do. Again, we do look at our other fellow cities to kind of get ideas of who does this. A 1% utility users tax is probably in the neighborhood of 1.5 million revenue to the city. So really, that's pretty much what I wanted to go through, just to kind of give you those and set those out in case, you know, when we're looking at things down the road, if we did have another disaster, if we did have a situation where we really wanted to make sure that our reserves were funded to 100% of our operating budget or any other means of a policy that we wanted to change. As you know, we could go through the reserve policy again and look at those options, and we may have to when we get to the point where we're looking at what we may need to balance the budget for the 2021 year. But in essence, basically, I just share this with you so that you're aware of the several things that the city could do. And on that, I will stop sharing my screen. And if there's any questions from today, I welcome them, but I'd like to just very quickly go through my notes that I've made while I was talking, so they could be a little jumbled. Just very quickly at the next meeting, besides talking about public safety, the follow-ups will be kind of looking at what other cities are expecting as far as shortfall or revenue over expenditures. Looking at how the STR, if we can quantify how STRs and the change in the ordinance has had any impact on revenue. Public safety, what are we spending in detail? What is that $20 million breakdown to? And include the crime data, maybe for the last 5 years, broken out by category. Looking at, I believe I saw in the corner of my eye an email that went to the council's blind copy talking about the permits and how they compared. So I'm kind of taking off that off my follow-up list unless there's more questions of the council that you'd like to ask. We will be revising the narrative section in section 7 of the book that came out. I think I just need 3 words in there, Jan. I'm not sure there's a comma. I'll have to think about it. But it really should say after city, it should say the bonds are not general obligations of the city, but instead are payable from the assessments collected from the owners of the properties. So we'll be changing that and making sure that that gets into the right documents. So that is something we'll take care of. And let's see. We're going to touch base on events, looking to see if the amount overall is okay. And I believe that's all I have. If I missed any, please jump in and let me know so that I can add those to my list. Otherwise, that's what we'll follow up with the start of the next meeting. And after that, we will go straight into public safety. And we will go from there. If we have time, then we could get more into the detail on events. But that is my story for today.
Awesome job, Janet. Awesome job. You are the rock star of finance. And Todd, brilliant structuring of input from each of the departments. It was very concise and very comprehensive look at the recent past and the future. So we are deeply grateful. Councilmember Jonathan.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly echo those accolades. One thing you did there at the end, you kind of you pulled a Columbo on us, right? It's like the last question is always the big bomb, right? The most important one. And you threw that new revenue sources out at us. And I just, I think that's worthy of discussion. So maybe a study session, I don't know. One of the questions in my mind, and maybe you can add that to the list, is if the purpose of a new revenue source is to help the city recover from COVID, then my question would be, can any of these measures have a set term, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is? And then as we said, what's the process? Is it a majority vote? Is it a 2/3 vote, et cetera?
And I think that I had challenged Janet early on just to come up with some possible revenue streams if we felt it was necessary to bring the budget into structural balance right now. As we're learning more about the ARPA opportunities, we're probably not going to be making that recommendation to you right now. Instead, providing you with the opportunity to see how the recovery goes over the next year. And it's just something that we're keeping our eye on between the public safety cost escalation as well as the recovery of the tourism industry. It's just something we want on your radar screen. I don't think we're going to be making any recommendations. We don't feel like there's a need to take that action right now, but you do have options. One of the big variables that that differentiates Palm Desert from some of the other cities as well is just the amount of contracting we do. We're not carrying, it really has a major impact on our health insurance, pension obligations, that sort of thing. So they're going to be dealing with much higher legacy costs in some ways. So we've taken a very measured approach moving through the budget in terms of where we add positions back, where we don't. But that is probably the single biggest variable to Palm Desert versus some of our other cities that don't rely on this contracting model is we're really putting most of our money into CIP projects, discovery centers, paying cash for our CIP versus taking ongoing money and putting it into funding OPEB and funding some of these other costs that just don't stop. So we are really difficult to measure against in the Coachella Valley based on our business model, which is a good thing. Presents you with a ton of flexibility moving forward, but we're really keeping our eye, and we'll talk about it more in 2 weeks, those public safety costs. And that's, I think, where that revenue discussion is going to have to come in if our TOT doesn't bounce back a little more.
I just would like to end with, the old motto, if you want less of something, you tax it. And Todd, I really hope we can find revenue streams like the ones you were just mentioning and looking at growing our revenue and helping our small businesses recover from what they've already been through this pandemic. So thank you.
All right, Gina said she'd like to finish there. Let's honor her request and finish.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for working so hard. See you soon.
Thank you all. This was
Thank
good.
you, Janet. Thank you, Louise. Thank you all.
I really appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to get vaccinated, get your test so we can reopen and help small business.